Everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! And video game news. Today is Friday, March 17th. Starting a little bit later today. Let's hop in here. I did actually play a little bit off screen, but probably not as much as I really should have, considering how I didn't really accomplish anything else during the past couple days. I've been messing with my router, which at this point my router seems to be so unstable that even a slight change potentially locks it up, although I think I may have figured out what the problem there was, that it was the certain settings as far as MAC address clones for both the Wi-Fi device and the WAN port just do not carry over when I restore from a backup. So it partially restores from a backup, not perfectly restores from a backup. To make a long story short, I was doing all of that trying to get Google Assistant and Google Home to work on my phone, and at the end of the day it seems like the problem was actually my phone. And yeah, that creates a weird situation, certainly, where you just don't ever have a great time to start over from scratch as far as cell phones. Like, I can't imagine I would ever want to spend the time to just like buy a new phone and try and copy over all the data and all the settings by hand instead of just using Samsung Smart Switch to copy things over, or Google Backup and Google Restore. And arguably one of my settings is possibly the thing that's causing the problem. But yeah, I was just having this horrible problem where Google Assistant, trying to talk to it, it just says, I don't understand, and it wasn't really a case of it didn't understand me, because I'd even type in the answers and it would work. It would still not work when typing in the questions and the commands, and when I disconnected from my Wi-Fi it would work. So something about my cell phone and the way it connects to Wi-Fi is causing it to fail, and that's where I was thinking it was my Wi-Fi. Inherently, I think Google Assistant probably does not like that I have DNS crypt, and that the DNS crypt is bouncing to a different location, to a different country, and it's doing some geo-blocking to not work. It also doesn't seem like it works particularly well with WireGuard VPNs. So higher security, that it stops Google Home, Google Assistant, which is frankly a low privacy application. Undoubtedly, like anything you're doing with Google is just engaging with people who definitely are collecting your information. There's a difference between security and privacy. Usually most people want both, though, and that there's a large amount of people, certainly, that would never use Google Assistant if they're security minded, in the same way that there's a large group of people that wouldn't use things like Facebook, or that would use DuckDuckGo for searches instead of Google, or a privacy focused browser. I use on my cell phone Dolphin, I believe is the name of the browser, anytime I want to search something that I just don't want to get advertised more search results for later. And I have all links opened up in, I believe, Brave, even though Brave still has its own little problems as far as security on my cell phone. So I have like links, any website link you click on opens up in Brave, and then anything that I want to search and not have any security, I use Dolphin, and then only if I want to put it in the like search history and remember it, do I then move it over to Chrome on my cell phone. Meanwhile, I'm using Firefox on my phone and on my computer, And I was able to, as far as the small amount of progress I did today, over the past couple days, is I was able to install some custom, like, CSS, HTML type code for the Firefox browser itself. So now when I am hovering over a link, and I'll show this later, it will not pop up a link preview at the bottom right, the bottom left of the screen. Now that is lowering safety there a little bit, because now links could take you anywhere, but I can also say I've never even been able to read, since my TVs are 8 feet away or so. I've never even been able to read what the screen says, let alone looked at it to see if it's taking me somewhere weird. I am simply just assuming that if I was going to click on a link that was incredibly malicious or incredibly dangerous, Firefox would just stop me. But it very possibly wouldn't. But I also am assuming that I just don't click on that many links to strange places either. So I was able to fix that, which will make the web preview a little bit more polished. I actually did find an image that I'll try and upload and see if I can use it, as far as it's showing all the heroines from the Yu-Gi-Oh! Cartoon. So just the main female characters or side characters. There really isn't main female characters in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Series over the different series. But I've wanted something like that to put potentially on the side of my WebPeak as a way of just describing different art styles. I don't know if I can really get that to work particularly well, or if that would just take up too much space. And frankly, it would be a little ridiculous to have that pointed out. Let's see if we can do something here. I think this is probably the last of my possibilities. If I'm gonna win here, is that we need to summon as many of these on the field as possible so that we can summon this. Barely made it there. This is one of those tricks in particular that I need to learn to be better with. I'm somewhat confused as far as like whether losing in this event would potentially lower my chances of moving up rank or not. So yeah, I did a little bit for like the presentation preview, as far as all of that goes on my YouTube channel, but when I'm live streaming, but not a lot. I uploaded a few videos, but I didn't schedule any. I spent way too much time working with Google Assistant and my router, spending most of the whole time doing that. The whole reason I was doing this is because Google Clock, and this is going to be complicated on top of general smart home programming complications. But if you use Google Clock, which I would highly recommend on Android instead of just Samsung Clock or any other default clock, it can run Google Assistant routines. Now by default, what that means is it's going to just say hello to you, the time is this, your commute is potentially going to be this, these are the reminders on your calendar, these are birthdays, things like that. But they can also, noticeably, through a Google routine, control smart devices, which, because Google Assistant ties into the Tuya Smart Life interface somewhat, means I can create a scene that would be activated when the alarm clock is dismissed. It's funny that the routine only activates when the alarm clock is dismissed instead of being able to trigger something when the alarm clock goes off, but whatever. So I can make a scene in Tuya that will activate, that can, for my instance, dismiss the alarm in my physical, like, nightstand alarm. So I'm trying to integrate, here is the modern way of doing things, as you make an alarm on your phone, with here's the old school way of doing things, to have an alarm next to your bedside. Now, if this wasn't also a sunrise sunset alarm clock, then I would say you pretty much have no reason whatsoever to have an alarm clock. But there is something fairly nice around the idea of light waking you up instead of a buzzing noise. That being said, I think Google Clock also has a sunrise wake up ability, so you may really not need the nightstand device at all. And there's still some programming issues I am having with my nightstand alarm clock, as far as just trying to recognize if there is even a way to detect whether the alarm was turned off by a human or whether the alarm just turns itself off after a specific time. I'm trying to figure out a way to program it in an extremely tight and limited setup. Let's toss that. But yep. So yeah, the alarm clock can be dismissed through Google Assistant. So you're going through one smart home interface, Google Assistant, which does some of that, and Google Home, which is part of Google Assistant, and it's all been renamed, I think, to Google Nest Hub or Nest stuff. So the technology has even transitioned somewhat from that. But also, because you're controlling other kinds of smart home things, you can integrate a lot of other things together. And I hope I haven't already talked about this in the last stream, but maybe I did, where I can turn on my Roku TVs, I can turn on the Hopper dish control set-top boxes when the alarm is dismissed. So potentially you have an alarm clock, you dismiss it, and then you don't have to immediately pick up a remote and turn on a TV, which is absolutely the first thing I do, and I think a lot of people do when they wake up, is that you want light and you want noise in the room. So yeah. Just saving yourself a couple extra actions in the morning, and just automating things so it's nice and automated. Which, that's the whole idea of a smart life, is embracing this world where inherently we have been trained throughout our entire lives that you walk into a room and you flip a switch on the wall to request light, or flip a switch to request light and ceiling fans, or flip two switches for light and ceiling fans. then you pick up a remote and you press a button to request the TV to be on, and then you usually have to change the channel and turn the volume adjusting, so you're hitting multiple buttons there. Then you say walk to the kitchen and you put food in a microwave and you press a bunch of buttons. You have to open the door to the refrigerator. You're just constantly interacting with things that in an ideal scenario could be automated. Like you really don't need to have to walk into a room and turn on a light. There should be a motion sensor that knows you're in the room at some level and just turns on the light automatically. When you walk in front of a refrigerator, if the refrigerator door opened or showed you what was inside, that'd be great. If food could be refrigerated in a microwave and then turned on as you entered the room or 5 minutes before you were expected to enter the room to heat the food. If your coffee is already brewed because you put it automatically scheduled it. Like, there's a lot of optimization here where you could simply walk into a room, and arguably even the walking part may be a little unnecessary. It does potentially get into the world of WALL-E, where humans just become big flat blobs that have everything handed to each other. And yes, that is a problem, certainly, as far as the human body is designed to somewhat require action and mobility and exercise. But then those conveniences on top of exercising properly would be better. Like, there definitely is a scenario where if we got exercise down to a perfected science, you would do those exercises exclusively, and then other actions which are somewhat similar to exercising could be automated, because those other actions potentially cause inappropriate jerking, twisting, lifting, things like that. There's a big difference between bending over with your back and picking up groceries versus squatting and bench pressing and deadlifting, things like that, which are actual exercises that have real standards and control around it. Anyways, yeah, I feel like I'm kind of rambling, and today is definitely not a day to ramble. My arms, by the way, are still healing from being sunburnt, and it wasn't really a bad sunburn. It's just annoying. The slight distracting pain is definitely annoying. Let's see. Oops. So yeah, anyways, that's what I've been dealing with and messing with. Fairly irritating to mess with my router for a day or two and realize it's not really even anything wrong with the router. But the bigger news, certainly, we should just jump into news, is that there's a Steam sale going on with the 1-year anniversary of the Steam Deck, and the Steam Deck is on sale. So, arguably, I should buy a Steam Deck. It's 10% off, so the price is not great for a 1-year-old piece of equipment that, let's be generous and actually call it only a 6-month old piece of equipment because of just the weight limit that was on it. 10% is not the best discount ever, but you're that is if you were looking at it specifically from the idea of if you were buying all these components off the shelf and in normal times, would 6-month-old graphics card CPUs be 10% off? The answer to that is probably no at the current time, and hasn't been probably yes in many years, because there is definitely this situation where there's been part shortages, and even before part shortages, graphics card CPUs tended to have a MSRP listed price, and in that MSRP listed price they never tend to go down by much. Perhaps a video card that's like $450 will go down to $400, so you're talking maybe 10-15% off. But overall, having all the components that are in a Steam Deck, there actually isn't any chance that every single component in the Steam Deck would be on sale for 10% off at the moment otherwise. And there's definitely an argument to buying the cheaper one even with the worse glass, and then saving up for whatever Steam Deck 2 looks like. You already buying the cheaper one or asking certainly for like a modification and replacing the eMMC, which, yeah, maybe it's best. It may very well be best to simply have buy the cheapest Steam Deck, live with it as it is. Don't change the eMMC. Don't try any kind of crazy mod out there, if such a mod exists, that would have you change the monitor screen. There is this new technology that's coming out fairly soon, hopefully, for much thinner, different types, a completely new kind of technology for cooling chips. If that got put in a Steam Deck, the Steam Deck would be quieter, and potentially thinner, or it probably wouldn't get any thinner physically, but it would have more room, I would suspect. There we go. So yeah, there's really no indication this new technology would be in a Steam Deck 2, but it would be cool if it was. But it would be hard to modify this new technology in also, so it'd be kind of crazy side projects. But yeah, I could see the argument, buy the cheapest one. Now, arguably, I'm also in a weird position where I don't really need a Steam Deck for myself. I would really want to buy it for my nieces and nephews, which means buying multiple of them, to then let them family share my Steam account. Now, there's, of the 2,000 or 3,000 games I have in my Steam account, there's probably closer to only 300 that are kid friendly, so there needs to be a limitation there as far as just what they would be allowed to play. I definitely wouldn't want them to accidentally fall into playing Honey Pop or something, which is an actual adult game, mature rated game. But I want them to play the Lego games and things like that. But there is definitely issues there. Certainly, it's expensive to buy multiple Steam Decks, even at 10% off. It was always going to be expensive. The desktop dock mode stuff has minimal use. Like, kids really don't do too much on computers. There's been this large push to go into Chromebooks for anything, any kind of work, and go into specific websites when doing projects too. So it's not like it's not so much that they're going into Photoshop or even Word or Excel as much as they're going to the school's website, and then on the school's website there is a word processor web form that looks kind of like Word. If anything, it looks like older Words types of Word. But yeah, there are definitely some compromises and limits there. There's also the big issue, certainly, as far as if kids are only interested in playing Nintendo games, or they want a PlayStation 5, getting them a Steam Deck, or if they want an Xbox Series X instead, getting them a Steam Deck is going to be a bit of a hard sell. If all their friends are playing PlayStation and you get them a Steam Deck, then that compromises things too. And certainly kids are not going to appreciate a Switch or a Steam Deck anywhere as much as parents who had to earn the money and spend it on. Parents will eventually appreciate the idea that, well, Steam sales happen and games are really cheap at that point. But if you're not a parent who's playing on Steam and has games, getting a Steam Deck for your kids is a much harder sell. It is also St. Patrick's Day, and arguably, and this is a problem certainly whenever you decide to celebrate any holiday, it gets compared to how much you celebrated before. So here we have Bethesda Game Studio putting out a St. Patrick's Day leprechaun theme type image, and then I have to compare as far as International Women's Day, Women's Month, all of that. Did Bethesda Game Studios specifically put out anything around that? And was it as much of an announcement then compared to, was it as good of an announcement or as big of an announcement? Here, scrolling down through Bethesda Game Studios, for instance, here they have a February featured modeler, which is somebody who made a model. But yeah, let's see. These posts here. Here's Pi Day. Here's January's modeler of the month. So they do have a different mod, not modeler. So yeah, there's a Pi Day post here, but seemingly no International Women's Day post. And that really comes into a problem unless they delete the post. And so you kind of have a main female character in Starfield, so there definitely was opportunity to put a post to promote Starfield. There's also potentially an opportunity that they could say there are no snakes in Starfield, or there's no snakes in space. We can thank St. Patrick for that. You could definitely have more of a St. Patrick's celebration around actual St. Patrick instead of just falling to Irish slanderish Irish leprechauns and shamrock stuff. Although, in all fairness, I don't think Irish people particularly are too upset around the St. Patrick's present events. But yeah, it is as off the mark and far from what it originally was designed to celebrate as Christmas is with Santa Claus, or even Christmas and winter solstice, like pagan winter festivals being turned into Christmas. Video Games Chronicle has given Resident Evil 4 5 out of 5 stars, saying Resident Evil 4 is a faithful restoration of an all-time classic. There's new content, more new content than I would have expected, certainly, in Resident Evil 4. And I have to say, it does seem like it is just a better experience. Like, it is... I've said it probably 3 or 4 times at this point, but it is increasingly ridiculous to squabble over Ashley or Leon looking a little bit different in the 3D models when it seems like on every other beat everybody is loving it. It is a very interesting question as far as the non-dual stick control nature of the original Resident Evil 4, in which you just don't control that smoothly and you can't move when you're aiming at zombies, which I thought was kind of intentional control points, but in the remake that is out the window. So you can now target somebody and slowly walk backwards as they're walking towards you and shoot them in the face while moving, which potentially removes some cheap shots that you might have taken in the original Resident Evil. They've gotten rid of, I looked at the review, they've gotten rid of the health bar completely with Ashley, so no longer are you having to manage her health or upgrade her health. I'm not sure you upgrade any of the health. There are more submissions. More submissions give you special currency that upgrades your guns in special ways. So, for instance, your handgun does not have a red dot sight. Originally, you have to finish the submission to get that as a modification. Apparently, the lake is bigger and more explorable. Entire areas have just been added. So, while like that first village area at the beginning of the game feels like it's the same level as it was in the original game, it actually has several little caves and secret things, or at least one cave secret thing. There's a whole stealth section, stealth abilities. So yeah, it definitely is a brand new way to play Resident Evil 4, or a brand new game that feels very much like what they probably should have done as far as the shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, in that while doing the shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, which nobody really talks about that movie, because why would you? If you're going to watch Psycho, watch the original. But if they had added frames and scenes in between the shot-for-shot remake and Psycho, that would have been fairly amazing. But you can see here on OpenCritic, the top critic average is 92%, and the 96% of critics recommend it. You're getting 10 out of 10s. Resident Evil 4, the original Resident Evil 4, really was one of the best games ever, and groundbreaking more than I think people realize. But yeah, it's hard to not get a little bit hyped around all these reviews. What would be incredibly shocking anytime you see such a high amount of consistency among reviewers, which, if anything, this is an argument against mainstream video game journalists being fairly too consistent. There should be some contrarians out there that are complaining about something, and if anything, I would probably consider myself the closest type of person to be one of those kind of contrarians. But yeah, there's oops. Oh well, that'll work still. This guy may be trying to make me run out of cards. But yeah, it would be incredibly shocking if it turned out there was something majorly wrong with Resident Evil 4. One hopes all these mainstream video game journalists who are reviewing it played the game all the way through. But yeah, it would be very shocking. And there's definitely a possibility that RE4 now may just not have the same level of longevity that RE4 would have potentially had in the past. It may be very much a game that plays very well in the first playthrough and then has very little reason to play it potentially a second time through, let alone a third, fourth, or fifth time. I also don't know if there's a mercenary mode at all. It would make a lot of sense if the new side missions did some of the stuff that we saw in mercenary modes in RE4, and there definitely was content that was added later to RE4, like the Ada Wong 2 DLCs. I have not seen any evidence that any of that exists either. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if that content gets announced and released as extra purchase DLC. But yeah. So far so good as far as all of that. Censored Gaming listed a link to this AppleCensorship.com article. The fundamental rights of millions are impacted when Apple does business with authoritarian regimes. And it's tagged App Store, Hong Kong, Russia, and Apple. So this almost certainly is connected to affects some games too. There definitely is a push for companies like Apple to not do business at all in see if we can just cancel this and see if this stops this guy's ability. Maybe that will ruin their plan. Got some cosplay things. Here they're asking, as social media in the world of cosplay has changed quite a lot in the past few years, I would like to ask, what makes social media personalities interesting to you? Are you still interested in the world of cosplay as before? So the argument here is that here we have, I believe, Cammy from Street Fighter cosplay, and is this potentially the world before? She's defining it in that you have a fairly accurate cosplay image here, or outfit. They've done hair, makeup, maybe even lenses. There's a scar on the face. There's a hat that was done. The leotard itself is basically a basic green leotard with some black stitched on the side, but that is kind of what Cammy's outfit is too. Belt making as far as the gun holsters here. Definitely a lot of modeling around this. Arguably not even the best of polish on cosplay, but honestly, cosplay costumes are just never going to be as good as something you could animate in a video game, so it is always going to be a little bit janky. About as janky as even some of the best makerspace type projects I've tried to do, and that nothing comes out perfectly polished, not unless you own millions of dollars of equipment and can professionally produce things. Like, see if we can activate this one then. See if this guy can cancel that. Let's go ahead and do that. In the turn. Like, for example here, these could be just rolls of painter's tape that have been painted, and you can see definitely some level of smoothness and polish that you'd potentially like on this. These are just almost certainly standard leotard stockings that have been painted with some green paint on them, but not a ton of detail. Arguably though, really close and good video game cosplay. There is also certainly a problem with, if I am going to continuously talk about cosplay, which I really don't have time right now today to be talking about. Like, if I see cosplay based on an anime, and then the anime, like Kamiki no Yobai, no, I can't even pronounce it. Dragon Ball. Let's just use Dragon Ball as an example, since that's one I can pronounce without seeing the words in front of my face. If I see somebody cosplaying as Goku, and there are plenty of Dragon Ball Z type games out there, is that really video game cosplay at that point? Of course, at a certain level, I ran out of cards. Wow. He decked me. You don't see that very often. But see, I'm losing here. See, win a duel and increase your duelist level, aim to advance to the second stage. Yeah, at a certain level though, here you have one of the characters from Witcher 3. She is also Yennefer. Is also based on Yennefer that's described in the books, although maybe she's described differently in the books. So you already have that second iteration happening quite a bit as far as video game cosplay, or whether you would consider video game cosplay. And again, this is more detailed of an outfit. The gloves could be right off the shelf, but then the extra ramps, the feathers, the boas, this leather bustier, all of this might be off the shelf, but you're adding so much of it. Hair, eye color, almost certainly done. Very possibly a custom made necklace, or a necklace that is close enough. And I guess it is costume play and more than it is described as costume designing. It's not costume fashion designing alone, so it would be unfair to take points off as far as just visually criticizing cosplay if it was blatantly obvious that everything had been purchased, because that really doesn't matter. Being able to purchase a bunch of wood at a hardware store still requires people to have skill to put the wood together to build a fence or build a doghouse. Nobody would criticize somebody who built a doghouse by saying, oh, all you did was buy a bunch of wood and nails and then put it together. That's a level of skill that should be appreciated. So yeah, we have another one here. Arguably I may need to zoom out a little bit more on these images, or just click on the images like this, and then that would work too. Jumping around here, Infinity Ward put out a fairly low effort image here as far as St. Patrick's Day. Apparently this is actually happening in game, where they've changed the color of the water to green and added a rainbow, and arguably this rainbow may actually land in a location in Warzone 2, which would assume there's a bunch of guns there. Of course, again, we'll see if Infinity Ward, well, frankly, Infinity Ward is getting retweeted, so let's see if we can click here and see what their posts are alone. Let's go ahead and set this, in the turn. I should have just summoned that, but whatever. The thing specifically about Infinity Ward and Call of Duty, if they were trying to do an International Women's Day, would be the problem that there's very few female characters. Like, this is the first time I've ever even seen a female character in that, and certainly that runs into problems with do we know which one he destroyed? Yep. That runs into problems with the military overall, in that, yeah, military tends not to have a lot of women, or any women, depending on what country's military you're talking about, on the forefront of battle and conflict. Here we have Infinity Ward actually celebrating International Women's Day, but it is a very low effort image certainly happening there, and it doesn't seem like much more than that. Yeah, so you have this one picture, so 1-for-1 equivalency here as far as Infinity Ward celebrating St. Patrick's Day versus International Women's Day, but at least in St. Patrick's Day they have an actual event happening programmed in the game, which they didn't have for International Women's Day, which, yeah, that creates those comparisons, and those I think are fairly fair comparisons to make. Like, particularly, since your game is about war, there's a lot that could be said about how women are especially used in wars and abused in wars. And as such, this card here I have to play or I'm gonna lose. It they should donate like some money to women and children victims of war. Or in the game event, they could say double XP if you play as a female character, or like you have to play as female characters. I don't know if people would love that, but something like that would make a lot of sense. Something more than just a low effort Photoshop. Minecraft wearing green for St. Patrick's Day. The dumb idea of people pinching, which, you know, technically still assault to walk up to somebody and pinch them. It's probably never going to go to a court case, but technically still assault. So yeah, it really is a thing that should not be encouraged as far as wearing green or getting pinched, which the way you would avoid that from happening certainly would be to get rid of the wearing green idea. So we won one there by surrender, and that didn't move us up. And overall, since Minecraft and Mojang are owned by Microsoft, you'd think that there would just be an overall Happy St. Patrick's Day post. In this case, you have the opposite accusation being made, in which it definitely feels like Minecraft did more for International Women's Day here than they've done for St. Patrick's Day. Which arguably probably should be that way. Like, one holiday is celebrating women. St. Patrick's Day is literally celebrating a Catholic saint that I don't think too many people really care about, and his alleged or supposed miracle of driving all the snakes out of Ireland without more information or historical context. That seems to be something that's not that big of a deal. Like, sure, if there was a lot of history of snakes killing or biting people in Ireland, then there would be something more to that. Or if there was more backstory or history to St. Patrick, which I'm unaware of, I would be unaware of that. Certainly. Noticeably, though, let's just scroll to the top here. Only Jackbox Games at this point has put out anything as far as a sale around St. Patrick's Day. Like, none of those other games saying anything as far as discounts or anything. And this one's really only a sale because the Steam sale is happening right now. So it would make a lot of sense for there to be sales going on right now. And then you could say for St. Patrick's Day, buy these games for St. Patrick's Day. They are discounted. They're on sale right now. Inherently, I guess I should be fair, and when Easter comes along, which is the next major holiday I could think of, we'll see if there's any mention of Easter at all, which I suspect not. It'd be hard, certainly, to have an Easter sale or a celebration of Easter, which is a more solemn event than St. Patrick's Day, as far as just how people celebrate it, at least. But arguably it is a more religious holiday and a more important holiday by far than St. Patrick's Day is. and I'm still scrolling down Jackbox's games. And honestly, if they did celebrate International Women's Day, it's kind of impossible to find out. They just have too many posts. They're posting once or twice a day, which if anything, it just highlights how Jackbox is really doing a good job. You know, I went back to Valentine's Day and didn't see anything. Just really doing a great job of promoting themselves and being a Twitter that promotes itself. Let's see. Censored Gaming, their 250 plus page reports were released on the website Apple Censorship in December, investigating Apple's censorship and compromises in Hong Kong and Russian markets. The gaming industry is being investigated by a U.S. representative over how it handles risks and harms of in-use harassment and extremism in online games. We've heard about this story. The rep is unhappy with how the investigation is now going and is now considering legislative action, which is probably to say that the person who started the investigation didn't have direct control of it, was probably a little crazy, because let's face it, at least 50% of all the representatives in the US are crazy, and probably at least 50% of all politicians around the world are crazy. France's president raising the retirement age and causing immediate public outcry and rioting and demonstrating. Rioting is probably the wrong term, although it might actually technically be the perfectly correct term. But yeah, I think the investigation is worth having if you're going to legitimately, in an unbiased way, do the investigation. Which, does any political action ever have an unbiased, a lack of bias, or is done in any kind of legitimate way, or is it all just bandstanding for trying to pass a law that you already have planned to pass at the beginning? This is a tired narrative, certainly, as far as it being an issue big enough to even focus on, as far as in-game harassment and extremism in video game, in online games. It's just not really anything other than a red herring at the moment. I think many people would probably argue that the US government harasses its citizens way more than the average amount of harassment you might get playing video games, amongst a wide number of laws. Well, don't suppose we can do anything else here, so I have to just keep on summoning. Go ahead and activate this. Let's see if this works. Go ahead and activate this. Let's see if this works. Otherwise, I probably should just surrender. do anything else? Don't think so. There we go. We may have turned that around. Yep. It definitely probably shows that you have no real political credit or influence when you start an investigation and then the investigation is not going in the direction you want, so now you're considering making a law. We had talked about before how models of Blue Protocol, I believe, which is being made in partnership with Amazon, will be censored in the West. Well, we also now have evidence and Amazon coming out and being direct as far as how Lost Ark in its Western version is being censored and changed. These what they call granny panties under bloomers are being added to a lot of characters. Just by default, that is their policy for Lost Ark. And then certain outfits that were considered somewhat revealing, that were starter outfits, are now locked behind later gameplay, but still available, which is fairly inconsistent. Here's a retweet I may have missed. Alice Gear Age of CS. Let's see. Apparently at some point an update came out that causes the Aces costumes to be removed and the Flash costume to be changed. Same changes are only found on the PlayStation version, so they pushed the censored versions of the costumes and the update to the Switch version, when really it was only PlayStation that was requiring those censorships. And that's the problem of any platform having censorship, is that it's too easy for programmers to do a bad job and accidentally censor the version that isn't supposed to be censored. Censored Gaming also has a Ko-Fi Coffee website, which I have not ever looked at coffee, but clicking on that link brought me to this. Seems like you can give $5 as far as that goes. Maybe the tip here is different. Seems to me like he has only gotten $45 since starting the page a couple days ago, which is still a decent amount of money depending on how much of a cut coffee takes, if they take anything. There is definitely an argument around me potentially starting to apparently coffee doesn't take a fee at all, so interesting. Yeah, there definitely is an argument here, and you can put comments here. This is probably better than Patreon, although Patreon is more of a consistent level of support that I can see a lot of people not wanting to do, versus a one-time tip. And up until this point, I've always just asked people to friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wish list, which those games can range from below $5 on rare occasions to well over $5. But yeah, despite me doing everything to trip myself up by not making content and not doing enough work and being just busy with non-YouTube stuff, I am actually getting a decent amount of I'm actually getting a decent amount of new subscribers and views from the shorts still also. Might as well See if we can do something there. So yeah, that's something for me to potentially think about. I still have a lot of stuff I need to play, and you have about 9 days to get to level 20. We're at level 7 now, but definitely not making the most amount of progress here as far as challenges go. And daily challenges, we're getting all of that done, making more progress. I'm potentially a fourth of the way there. Alright. Let's see. Do I have any other major stories I want to talk about today? Don't think so. Oh, I meant to mention this, and I didn't. The chat is broken today, so if somebody is chatting to me, I apologize. I just don't see it at the moment, and just won't see it today. So apologies if you are trying to say hi to me. It's not that I'm ignoring you, although sometimes I do ignore people. But yeah, let's turn that on. So ideally, I want to go through the news fairly quickly today, and the reason is I'd like to do some shopping, even if it is just fantasy shopping, since I've already blown my budget on other things as far as Steam sale stuff. Like, I really have gotten to the point where I'm barely playing any games, so I'm barely buying any games. Let's see if any of this is new news. Modern Warfare 2, Warzone 2, Season 2 Reloaded patch notes. Yeah. This lady definitely seems like she's being promoted as something big, or at least a main character. In all fairness too, though, even if they did try to put out a post around International Women's Day, Modern Warfare 2 might get a lot of hate from that too, since Modern Warfare, I don't even know which one it was, since there was a Modern Warfare like game that got a lot of hate for having a lady on the front lines in a timeline when she wouldn't be on the front lines with a artificial arm shooting a rifle, which would not be really possible with the artificial arm. In this case, though, it would be a different scenario, though. It is very believable that you would have potentially an operator or even a contractor that was a lady in modern times firing modern guns. So this is much more believable. Honestly, what they probably should have done is created a spin-off series of Modern Warfare Call of Duty that was something like Call of Duty Femme Fatales, and it's just an alternate universe in which an all-female team, kind of like the Tuskegee Airmen, was created, and that they are elite operators in this alternate future world, characters that very much might be along the lines of Dead or Alive beach volleyball, in the sense that maybe they're not in bikini so much, but it would let Modern Warfare developers develop more female models and female hair flow physics and things like that. Maybe a little bit of boob and butt jiggle, but not anything too extreme. And then those characters could be slowly integrated into the main storyline, in which it would make some sense. That's better than trying to put a female character on the front cover out of the blue in a series that has long since had a male or male main characters. Anyways, Video Games Chronicle says the March PlayStation Plus catalog and classic titles have been confirmed, including Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection, which is an example I was pointing to, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Street Fighter V. Noticeably here, Street Fighter V is not even amongst the pictures there. Let's see. Apparently the Federal Trade Commission lawyers wants more info on the Microsoft's 10-year deals with Nintendo and Nvidia. The government body also wants to know more information on Microsoft's exclusivity plans. Inherently, these are the kinds of subpoenas that will just get traded back and forth through this whole process for pre-trial, if they even get to a trial, procedures for a long time. That's how you stretch out the length of a trial and increase the cost of a trial. I also want to point out that I listened to the audio of the last stream and I had my microphone, I think, just too close to me. Like, you usually do want to be right up on the microphone, and arguably maybe my microphone is just too low, and I should just have it blocking my field of view a little bit more. There's always room for improvement there, certainly, but yeah, it just did not sound as good as I would have hoped for it to. Yeah, this is basically not news at this point. It does imply that the FTC cares about these 10-year deals in a way that they're going to obviously see that Microsoft is going to try and bring it up as evidence, and they're going to try and subpoena as much evidence to fight against that evidence, because Microsoft generally is going to want to make a very generic statement in court or to a judge. I'm not sure this really is a trial court type situation. There almost certainly won't be a jury in these kinds of proceedings. So they'll make the argument to a judge that they've made all these 10-year deals, and then the defense is going to say, well, actually we looked at these deals and these are the reasons why these deals shouldn't really sway the judge's opinion. Let's see. Moving on, the next Silent Hill movie has cast its leads and begins filming next month. Jeremy Irvine from Warhorse, I don't know who that is, and Hannah Emily Anderson from, I guess this is the Jigsaw reboot, will lead the return to Silent Hill. I haven't seen Jigsaw as far as the soft reboot of the Saw series. And honestly, I don't know if that soft reboot is still intact or if they didn't just make a new Saw movie after that and revert back to the previous timeline. In a lot of ways, it felt like the Jigsaw movie really wasn't a Saw movie in the first place, and it was just yet another movie that was getting Saw attached to it. Although at a certain point that very well could be the case too with a Silent Hill movie. Whoever these people are, we should actually just search these people. That would make the most sense. This is something that they should have done in the first place. So this is the male protagonist, I guess, that's going to be in the Silent Hill movie, Jeremy Irvine. He doesn't look terrible, and since it is based on a video game, uh, you would be looking probably at the back of his head more than the face of his head, but in the movie you probably will look at his face. He maybe looks a little too young. Alright. So let's see what she looks like then, because honestly, unless they change how this all plays, the female here character is probably going to be seen less often. Anyways, again, she looks young. All actors tend to look younger than they really are. And arguably newer actors being put in movie roles does make a lot of sense too. So she'll probably show up here and there as the lead. I would assume female love interest of this character. I do think in Silent Hill 2, this character, there's like a different evil version of the female love interest of the male character, so she does have an opportunity to show up more often, or she could show up in flashbacks or memories. Either way. Yep. So this doesn't really tell us much other than the two characters are somewhat closely following what was depicted in the games, assuming a couple things. Assuming Silent Hill itself takes place in America and the two main characters in Silent Hill are supposed to be white people, which I think in that case it probably was, but we do have to remember that the Silent Hill series is made by Japanese people, and they often make the models of Japanese people, particularly in the old days, look very similar to white people, and so Westerners assumed that they were just white people. But I think in Silent Hill's case, they are basically implying that it's happening in the United States somewhere. We're not seeing any major twist here. No massively non-traditionally beautiful people. No big fat people. There's no people with like different races in the movie. Arguably, you could potentially race swap this character and it probably wouldn't change too much, or this character, it probably wouldn't change too much as far as the actual narrative being told. Let's see. Let's see if we can look at the Silent Hill teaser trailer to see if there's maybe any other comparisons worth mentioning. Could go full screen on this, but I don't want to do that because then it'll get content ID. Yeah, you're seeing this big cockroach, and you're seeing a dirty Western looking bathroom, I would say. Right. That kind of cockroach, not likely in Japan. A dirty bathroom in Japan with tiles, not likely to be in Japan. You can definitely see, though, a haggard, kind of worn face on the main protagonist that you don't see in that actor, so maybe they'll have to do some makeup there. The actual age of the character is probably not that old, but him being haggard implies that he's been through a lot of stress. Yeah. The layout of the buildings and the signs here definitely imply, it says stop on the street in English. All that really implies that yes, Silent Hill is taking place. I do believe there is a spin-off Silent Hill either in development or that is going to be in development. Does take place in a Japanese Silent Hill, and that the general idea is that Silent Hill is more of a magical place that appears and torments people. So even amongst the United States Silent Hill places, there definitely is an argument that each Silent Hill game may take place in a different city, different state, different location. If anything, this teaser trailer may need to be modified to make the character look more like the TV actor, the movie actor, if it matters. And certainly there's a lot of hope here that Bloober Team, which they now I think are greenlit to actually make the Silent Hill 2 remake, there's a lot of hope that they do a good job around it and that they make an actual good game around the story and narrative too, and that the story and narrative can hold up on its own. Let's move on. Nintendo adds new Game Boy, Super NES, and NES games to Switch Online. Let's see if we get a full list here. Kirby's Dream Land 2, Burger Time Deluxe. So Game Boy, Xenovis as an NES game, and Side Pocket as a Super Nintendo game. They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel if they're adding games like Side Pocket, unless Side Pocket just has a lot more relevancy than I think, and people just really love Side Pocket as a pool table for the Super NES. But yeah, if they weren't doing Game Boy games now, it would have just been Xenoverse and Side Pocket, and Xenoverse is just a shoot 'em up game that I don't recognize either. Let's see. Former Criterion leads have formed a new studio called Fuse Game with a AAA game in development. A number of Criterion veterans left the studio after Need for Speed Unbound. Criterion, probably not connected to the Criterion collection of movies, which they just announced some really old, like Buster Keaton style black and white silent movie collections, which would be expensive almost certainly, but interesting potentially to own and watch. They're also making a new release of the really old Superman cartoons too, which is an interesting thought. Although these collections, I feel like they very much are just limited runs that you have to buy online before the price of them gets jacked up, and I'm not sure you really need to own those types of things, although maybe you do. Like, I'm not sure there's any streaming service that ever would have Buster Keaton collections or the Criterion collection of Buster Keaton movie shorts, or the old Superman movies, cartoons. Like, if you wanted to just watch the old Looney Tunes, I assume that's on Disney Plus, but maybe it isn't. Like, they may still be trying to sell those as collections on DVDs. Moving on, Shuhei Yoshida is going to be honored at the BAFTA Fellowship. The Sony executive joined such pioneers as Shigeru Miyamoto and Hideo Kojima, which, if anything, is probably highlights that BAFTA either has done a lot better job at giving awards to Japanese people, or Japanese people have done a lot better job of accepting awards from BAFTA than they have from, say, the Game Awards, because it would make a lot more sense if these kinds of honors had been given at the Game Awards too, on top of BAFTA. BAFTA does definitely have a longer history behind its name, although video game awards are relatively new, just a few years old. It heavily, I think, comes down to whether or not these people are allowed by their companies, such as Sony. Although he's an executive, so he probably would allow himself. But yeah, I don't think a lot of these Japanese companies allow their employees to go to the events like the Game Awards. Thus, why would you give an award out to somebody who can't even be there to accept it, or won't be there to accept it? In the end, it feels like there should be a Tokyo Game Awards award, Tokyo Game Show Awards, that are given out, and maybe they are given out and they're just not reported on as much. Remember, this is from Video Games Chronicle, which is a UK-based website, so they obviously are more focused on BAFTAs. An executive, though, Yoshida, it does make a question as to what he really has done with his career. He joined the PlayStation project in 1993, a year before the release of the original PlayStation, so maybe he has relevant influence there, but he may have been an executive and manager at that point too. He became the president of Sony Computer Entertainment, now known as Sony Interactive Entertainment Worldwide Studios, but then he lost that position at some point because we know it's a Western guy in charge of SIE. He's currently serving as the head of the Independent Developer Initiative, where his role is to look after and nurture smaller independent studios. If anything, that seems like a side stepping of where he should have gone, not a promotion. Let's see. They have given these awards to other people for outstanding achievements in art forms of moving image, including Alfred Hitchcock in 1971, Charlie Chaplin, David Attenborough, Steven Spielberg, Stanley Kubrick, and Martin Scorsese. Which, yeah, those are fairly prestigious names. Will Wright, for the Sims creator, Will Wright, got an award in 2007, so it has been, I guess, a lot longer since. But they are, I guess, having somewhat stiff competition, too. Maybe not that stiff of competition, though. Moving on. The cult 90s cartoon Toxic Crusaders is getting a retro-style beat-em-up, according to Video Games Chronicles. I guess the cartoon was called Toxic Crusaders, and it was based off of the first Trauma movie, Toxic Avenger. Maybe it was even a parody of Toxic Avenger. It is a little surprising that Trauma hasn't licensed more of its content to video games, assuming Trauma is involved in this at all. Toxic Crusaders was a cartoon spin-off of the Toxic Avenger, a notorious comedy horror movie from the zero-budget studio Trauma Entertainment. Yeah, the zero-budget studio Trauma Entertainment is still making movies. Usually not kid-friendly movies at all, and even Toxic Avenger is arguably not a even here they're saying, well, the movie and its sequels are very much unsuitable for children. The 13-episode Toxic Crusaders animated series was much more family-friendly. I don't think a zero-budget game development studio, whether it was Trauma or not, would particularly exist. If you're going to do a zero-budget game development, why not just be an indie developer and self-publish? That shows the ability you have as an indie game developer that an indie movie developer doesn't have as much of an opportunity to, because there isn't a place where you could put a movie up on something like YouTube and charge a certain amount to watch. There's no way for me to, for instance, upload my videos and then charge easily. You could do it by having private links, and maybe through Patreon they're trying to do something like that with a new system. But yeah, we potentially, it would be weird certainly to have a development studio act as kind of a publisher or gatekeeper to zero budget game development, whereas it makes more sense even now as far as movies. As for the actual idea of this being a good game, the funny thing is about beat 'em ups is that you have all the possibility of it being good or bad regardless of what the art looks like or who the characters are. If somebody in modern time tried to pitch a Simpsons beat 'em up game, people would think that would be ridiculous, but it worked very well. Generally speaking, as long as the characters are somewhat violent in their personalities, it makes all the sense in the world that a beat 'em up would work, as long as they have a rogues gallery of enemies to also fight. If you tried to do something more like the Care Bears or My Little Pony, there might be a little bit of a problem there in that there aren't enough enemies, but that would be about the only real problem there. Moving on. Let's see. WWE has a hidden playable action figure version of John Cena. Almost certainly it doesn't look exactly like the action figure version of the real world action figure. Apparently this information has been data mined, and arguably I think it was either The Rock or John Cena. I think it was John Cena that came out and was cornered and asked about Vince McMahon, and then just said something very nice about Vince McMahon as trying to dodge the response. Which, yeah, I could see people not really siding with John Cena on that one, for him to not throw Vince McMahon under the bus. But inherently, I suppose Vince McMahon probably is the only reason John Cena still has a career, and has a career in the first place, because yeah, it would have very easily gone the other direction. And it is worth pointing out, for every John Cena that was massively successful in WWE wrestling, there was hundreds, if not thousands, of other wrestlers that were not given a chance or successful, either due in part but because of Vince McMahon or wholly because of Vince McMahon. And even the most successful people like John Cena really aren't being paid a pension or the kind of health care that they should be paid, or even paid the right amount of money they should be paid for the physical activity they're doing. Let's see. Moving on, Minecraft's latest Switch update reportedly freezes the game on the loading screens. Players are struggling to load the game following the newest patch. New patch was released earlier this week, bringing it to version 1.19.6 and adding improvements to the emote system, as well as tweaks and bug fixes. However, reported by Nintendo Life, Switch owners are complaining that they're no longer able to play the game after downloading the update. Players are getting stuck at the game's loading screen, which gets as far as 66% and stays there permanently. I imagine there's a bunch of kids that are upset about that one. Moving on. UK regulator posts 6 studios' responses to the Activision Blizzard Microsoft Activision deal, all saying it should go ahead. None of the responses posted said the deal should be blocked. So that certainly implies the direction that the UK authorities are leaning, that they be willing to post this information. Let's see. FIFA president says its EA Sports Football Club rival will be the best e-game for any girl or boy. Gianni Infantino insists FIFA's new series will challenge EA's established dominance. This would be funny for it to turn out that FIFA was the one potentially pushing for more female soccer clubs, which is still very weird to me in my mind that they are splitting the genders in most of these football clubs, soccer clubs. Seems like soccer is probably one of the best games where you could have integrated teams perfectly fine. But yeah, I seriously doubt FIFA is trustworthy on this, and the EA's next non-FIFA soccer game, now that they've lost the FIFA license, will probably sell. You also have something here where you have Emirates Fly Better on the shirt of this female footballer, and that's United Arab Emirates, which is a country that does not give a lot of rights to women and almost certainly would not let one of their female citizens, dress with short sleeves and have their hair uncovered and dress in such a way. Of course, you all have all kinds of problems with all the slogans and sponsors. Generally, Adidas, I think, uses Chinese child labor, slave labor to make their shoes. And I think that's what I've heard. It is also a catch-22, certainly, when they try to promote more female soccer, in that people don't go to female soccer games or watch female soccer games. There's just not as much of an interest in it, so it never becomes popular, so thus it doesn't get more promotion. It probably is one of those cases where just forced diversity might make a lot of sense, in that every football game, every soccer game in the UK, if they potentially said that every game starts with a female game and then there's a male game that starts after the female game, a different team plays, or better yet, because then people would just show up late, all teams are just integrated. That would be the better thing, is that at least 40 to 50% of your team has to be female on the pitch at all times. That would potentially be a way to fix that too, and make it just like the only option. Alright, moving on. Let's see. Video Game Podcast has Jeff Grubb on it. I believe this is the second time. They're still advertising it as Giant Bomb's Jeff Grubb, but at this point I'm wondering if we don't start to see Jeff Grubb show up fairly consistently on the Video Game Podcast, which I'm not listening to at all, and I don't think Jeff Grubb is particularly a good news source. Anyways, but it does kind of feel like he might show up on VGC's podcast, and the Giant Bombcast probably will exist in some form, but potentially lose Jeff Grubb, which he hasn't really even been part of that podcast for very long. Moving on, the next Epic Games Store titles have been announced. Chess Ultra and World of Warships DLC will replace Warhammer 40k and Gladius Replicas of War. Chess Ultra looks kind of interesting, although not so many people probably gonna actually play it. Inherently, there is a game developer on YouTube that just published a game, and they've come out and said that they legally can't say the exact numbers, but they said that if they hadn't listed their game on the Epic Game Store, it would not have changed their bottom line at all. That the number of actual sales of a game on the Epic Game Store is incredibly, completely insignificant compared to Steam, and that the discovery queue and the discovery tagging options that are built into Steam are just, they exist where they don't exist in the Epic Game Store at all. So it's really impossible to find games on the Epic Game Store, or potentially sell a game on the Epic Game Store past its initial launch and people not knowing about it and getting hyped about it by advertisement or word of mouth. So yeah, Epic Game Store still really failing to compete. Let's see. It's been claimed, according to VGC, that the Suicide Squad is highly unlikely to drop its live service elements. Reports have suggested Warner is set to announce the fresh delay for the game. Which, yeah, you could definitely tweak them, but you're unlikely to completely drop live services when a game is pitched, when they've already spent the time and development efforts to put the live services in. We did see, in the case of kind of Marvel Snap, where the microtransactions on that originally were way worse, and there was some pushback on that, and then they made it slightly better in Marvel Snap, but still Marvel Snap's microtransactions and online services are way too high, and it is just designed in such a terrible way that I think very few people would actually want to spend money on Marvel Snap. The general recommendation is to not spend any money on it. I'm still playing that game though. It is wasting my time for not a good reason, but yeah, it is definitely poorly thought out as far as live services and constant microtransaction stuff. And I don't know how you could fix Suicide Squad like the way it is. Ideally, what you would want to get you'd want to get rid of all the microtransactions, and instead have DLC to purchase skins for certain weapons. You would want to get rid of all the stats stuff that you've already programmed, so just flush down the toilet a bunch of work. And then I don't know if the game, if it's designed around the concept of live services, I don't know if the game is easily playable as a single story narrative experience. That's what's on the back end of this, is that there probably isn't in Suicide Squad a chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3 if there's a whole bunch of live services around it. It could be like Borderlands, certainly, where you start a narrative and you go all the way to the end and you can play a second time and everybody will just be leveled up more. That could be the case, but it could also be that there's just a lot of random events and random spawns and random enemies that you're going to fight to get random loot drops that are going to be significantly worse than potentially purchasing loot boxes to get better loot drops. Although at a certain point it also just comes down to the idea that this is something that's being talked about too much, and we should just wait until the game actually comes out and see what it is, because it's getting to really baseless speculation more than anything. Starfield has been rated 18 plus in Australia for high impact drug use. The same classification board previously gave Skyrim a 15 plus rating, which, yeah, I guess that just tells us that there are some drugs being used to any positive effect, which The rating noted that there is no sex in Starfield and very mild nudity. It noted that moderate impact for themes and bad language, as well as strong impact for violence. Under the drug use category, it was given the highest rating, high impact, which Australians really, really hate drugs in games. So I seriously doubt this is a case, though, where in the game you're taking drugs all the time. Maybe you are. Maybe you are just using stims as much as you might use in Fallout. But in Fallout 3 in particular, you had all these drug stims, and then not really any good reason why you'd ever use them unless you wanted to roleplay as somebody who's just using a lot of drugs. But yeah, and they definitely don't have a lot of leniency in their ratings. So if it's a fake drug that you're eating, if you called it a food pill, for instance, that Australia would still probably call that a drug. If you called it a vitamin, it probably would still be considered a drug. You would have to make it look completely like a piece of food to dance around the idea that it's a drug of some sort. But yeah, calling them vitamins, calling them food pills would be no. Anything with a needle would almost certainly be considered drug use. It'll almost certainly be ridiculous to see the comparison of what this drug use is in Starfield versus what it actually what they're complaining about. But yeah, that's Australia for it. A highly pro-censorship country, or government at least, that definitely has it out against video games. And there is definitely a danger in other countries like the United States that the wrong politicians will be put into power, and all of a sudden we'll have the United States government trying to censor or disallow the sales of video games in general as much as they possibly can get away with. And yeah, we don't want to go down that path. We don't want to turn into China, which barely is allowing any video games and just hates the idea of kids or people playing video games at all. Let's see. Moving on. I mentioned this. The Steam Deck gets its first ever discount. The 10% discount marks the first anniversary of the system's launch. The new technology, if they integrated it into a Steam Deck 2, would potentially have half as tall fins here for cooling, and better cooling. There is a question certainly as far as the docks. I watched this happy birthday to the Steam Deck video, and at the end, let's see if we can show it off. So you have this girl and this guy really taking the reins of being the people in charge of presenting and making announcements now on Steam, that they're younger, more physically capable. Certainly it seems. Then you have a Steam Deck with a smiley face on it. They've added some like extra features and talked about how there's been over like 100 updates here. But then here you have Gabe Newell, which he sounded a little bit better. He wasn't like out of breath, but you can see he's sitting down here, hands crossed across his chest. It might be he's literally holding his hands so that he doesn't tremor. He's got this big old white beard. He's always been very fat, and he's just sitting down compared to the standing, and he's just reading this out loud. And jokingly, they have him thank the other two presenters, and he goes, "Who the hell are those people?" and then they cut the video there. But I mean, it's pretty obvious here. He's not healthy enough to even stand for the footage. Which, yeah, as a figurehead, like Gabe Newell is probably needs to retire and just let the new figureheads take it out and make a new Valve. Which, speaking of making new Valve, you notice here there's a lot of black in the background, and the Steam Deck and the Valve logo here is completely black. No more blue in that presentation at all. 10% across the board. So if you want the biggest 512 gigabyte one, 10% off. If you want the medium one, which is probably the best one to get, 10% off. And if you want the cheap one, 10% off. Arguably, maybe get the cheap one. Moving on, Disney Speedstorm enters early access in April. 3 versions of the game, ranging from $40 to $70, will be available. A Disney Mario Kart competitor. Might work, might not. It might work fairly well if it's coming to other consoles such as Steam. Yeah. 3 former Blizzard leads have set up a new AAA studio called Magic Soup Games. Jen O'Neill, J. Allen Brack, and John Donham want to make original AAA games. I think I've recognized J. Allen Brack as a name. Let's see. O'Neill's the CEO. Yeah. The trio of them worked on and led teams behind such franchises as World of Warcraft, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, EverQuest, Diablo, and Skylanders. So that's quite the diversity as far as what you could guess they might be working on in the future. I doubt it's going to be a ton of Skylanders-like games. I would suspect it's probably closer to Diablo or EverQuest. I didn't realize that EverQuest was made by Activision Blizzard. I feel like it wasn't. They definitely could make a new Pro Skater game without Tony Hawk, and people would be fairly hyped around that. I don't know if anybody really wants to make more World of Warcraft type content. Inherently, though, World of Warcraft, EverQuest, Diablo, and Skylanders are all games that, for the most part, have top-down perspectives and are fantasy games with MMO style missions that go on forever. Pro Skater only stands out as the exception there. So, you'd almost assume they are going to make some kind of fantasy game that is a top-down RPG type game that could be very kid-friendly or could be very not kid-friendly or somewhere in the middle. Let's see. Brack was president of Blizzard until it was announced in 2021 that he would be leaving the company to pursue new opportunities. He was one of the few Activision Blizzard employees referred to by name in a 2021 lawsuit by the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing, which accused the company's HR personnel executives, including Brack, of failing to handle sexual harassment and discrimination against female employees. So I guess that's probably why I recognize his name. O'Neill left the company claiming she was only offered equal pay with her male counterpart Mike Ybarra after giving a resignation. So there's 2 people who have been talked about in this whole mess. And then the 3rd person, John Donham. Let's see. Doesn't have any real controversy around his name, which is inherently highlights a problem, certainly, with all the mess that is Activision Blizzard, is that each of these people who have an entire like career behind them that have now been had mudslung against them, whether deservedly so or not, that will just follow them with every new announcement of new company, with every new position and new project. On one hand, you might have Jay Allen Brack being a bad guy, or Jen O'Neill being a bad guy, maybe not. Or maybe this is really a case that these are all the good guys and they went to a new company because they are tired of dealing with all the bad policy. It definitely feels to me like the fish rots from its head in the scenario of Activision Blizzard. And it is almost certainly the CEO that is the biggest problem. But it also is believable that this might just be a very well constructed cancel attempt of being done by a couple of irate former employees who maybe are going after Activision Blizzard for illegitimate reasons. Like, we'll never really know the truth, but it might be that the case that Activision Blizzard really isn't as bad as it's been chalked up to be. Ignoring all of that, though, I guess you just have to kind of give everything a clean slate and see what Magic Soup Games announces and what they actually reveal, and it will probably be 2 to 4 years before they have any final product available for sale. If it's anything like Second Dinner, which ironically we now have 2 new companies based on former Activision Blizzard employees that are food named, which if anything maybe just implies they're all obsessed with eating food. If it's anything like Second Dinner, though, this game company could make a game like Marvel Snap that was really hyped and then realized that because it was a small company, it isn't really that big of a game or interesting of a game. It would be a mistake, certainly, for them to make a really small scale, like World of Warcraft type game or Diablo game. Skylanders could be kind of small. EverQuest really can't be. Tony Hawk has to be at least a medium game too. So yeah, making a Diablo-like game and making it only a fourth as big would definitely not work. Let's see. Yu Suzuki is working on a range of Virtua Fighter NFTs. Suzuki co-created and directed Sega's fighting game series for many years, which at some level this almost feels like this would feel more acceptable if you have somebody who is either not working on Virtua Fighter anymore or who is just an artist themselves, making NFTs to sell to hardcore fans. See, Virtua Fighter's owner, Sega, has licensed the IP for the project, but the company itself doesn't seem to be directly involved. And he left Sega in the late 2000s. So yeah. It feels a lot less unacceptable, I guess is the best way to say it, when you just have a crazy artist who may be semi-retired making NFTs based on his artwork than it does for a soulless, faceless corporation like Sega to try and sell NFTs to the general public at ridiculous prices and markup. I could see a world where NFTs might become the new acceptable styles of owning an original painting, but even at that, there's just too much scamming going around it at the moment for anybody to really buy into that. Let's see. Moving on, EU regulators have delayed the decision on the Microsoft Activision deal after remedies offered. The antitrust watchdog will now rule on the acquisition by late May. So EU is still potentially on the fence. Although, if my research that I've done, my little bit of research I've done around this is, it seems like King is really the only company in the EU, so if they said no to the merger, I think the merger still would go through. Mint Mobile and has been bought out by T-Mobile, speaking of mergers. That probably won't affect video games much, but it's maybe one fewer cell phone company, which means potentially more higher bills in the future or less competition. Not too many people playing video games on their cell phones at the moment, but with less and less competition in the United States, that does not increase the odds of having unlimited data and fast data on cell phones to allow for a next generation of gaming on cell phones. Moving on, Bloober has revealed 11 minutes of gameplay from its Layers of Fear remake, which I'd have to assume that's probably just 11 minutes of playing very similar scenarios to what you would have already seen had you played Layer of Fears, or Layers of Fear 1. Not sure anybody, I don't think a very significant number of people played Layers of Fear 2. And personally, I didn't like Layers of Fear 1. I did like the DLC on Layers of Fear 1. I thought that was much better written. The general gameplay of just a walking simulator with some jump scares still didn't really work. And everything I saw about Layers of Fear 2 seemed to just go too far from the initial idea, where it would have made a lot more sense for there to be this like long-running series of horror things where the painting gets made in the first game, and then the painting, like another painting gets painted over it, or another painting gets made in the second one, for them to quickly jump to the idea of a movie and just any kind of art piece leading towards something horrific, a horrific painting or horrific movie being made. That was too big of a jump. That's something you do in the third or fourth game, not the second one. Alright. Moving on now, we have the Gamatsu things. I'm saying the same things as far as phrases. I'm saying no but way too much. I'm saying moving on. Moving on is probably one of the better verbal tics to have, though. And is still a lot. Ghostwire Tokyo is coming to the Xbox Series in April 12th alongside the Spider Thread update. I think we'd already talked about that. The psychological horror game Stray Souls has been announced for basically everything except for the Nintendo Switch. Which, let's see what this looks like. Yep. There is definitely a line between a game like this, where it seems fairly obvious that you're going to be able to get a gun and shoot the bad guys, the monsters and the scary things, and Layers of Fear, where you never have a gun and never have any defense at all. Like, there's action horror, and then there's, I guess, non-action horror or suspense horror, and the two have to be fairly separated, although you could have action sequences where you do have weapons and suspense sequences where you don't. A game called Blade of Darkness is now available for Xboxes and PlayStations. It was previously already released for the Switch and PC. Let's see what it looks like on Steam. Doesn't look visually polished enough to really meet my standards, as it were. It is rated very positively, but this is something that I would probably play this and immediately go, this looks ugly, why would I want to play this? This is not a relevant game to me as if it was like a old game being remastered. So I would just dismiss that immediately, as I am now doing. Let's see, we already talked about the Shin Megami Tensei 30th live band Shadows concert at Anime Expo set for July 1st. Harvest Moon, The Winds of Anthos, first details and screenshots. Some of these articles may very well have been things I looked at after I streamed. PlayStation Plus game catalog and classics lineup for March being announced. Check that out. This is all Gamatsu articles. Sea of Stars adds an Xbox Series and Xbox One versions. It's due out August 29th, alongside the previously announced versions. Sea of Stars being a turn-based RPG game that I guess is going to look like this. There's a certain extra level of polish on this animation that makes it stand out a little bit, but arguably not enough. I definitely would prefer to see more RPG games animated like this with what you would potentially call 16-bit pixel graphics, or even maybe you bump up this to 32-bit pixel graphics. Not that it really is 32-bit colors like 8-bit graphics or 8-bit colors, but just that the resolution, maybe it would be better to call it HD pixel graphics. But yeah, I'd prefer to see this than the chibi CGI characters that have low polygons that I've seen in so many other RPG games. We talked about the Toxic Crusader game coming out. I really might want to play this game just to figure out what the name of each of these characters are. And I'm fairly certain at least this character had a Trauma spin-off movie, but I wouldn't be surprised if every single character here has a Trauma character equivalent. If anything, you're running into the problem of too many characters to play as, since a beat-em-up game is almost certainly only going to have 4 characters on this, unless these are all bad guys and these are the 4 characters you play as, which maybe that is the case. Or, I mean, you could easily though have a beat-em-up game that had 8 characters and that would work fine. You don't want to go too crazy with it. I mean, in comparison to something like River City Girls, where the original River City Girls maybe had 2 characters to start with, and you could unlock 2 maybe later. River City Girls 2, I think, has closer to 4, maybe 6 characters you can pick from, but only 2 I think can be on the screen at the same time. The publisher of River City Girls, I believe it was, put out a music video type song for a fight that's either being added or was already existing in River City Girls 2, to, I guess, just promote it. I don't think we need to talk about the updates here. Fuga Melodies of Stool 2 details its Exo Tyrannus tank and Soul Cannon and Manigarm weapons. If you want to check out all of that. The Soul Cannon, I think, is the weapon where you take a character and use their soul to attack somebody to do massive damage, but then you lose that character permanently in the fight. Permanently in the story. Moving on. A game called Welcome to Kokori-san. Now, Welcome Kokori-san launches May 24th for PC, May 25th for Switch, and later for PS4, iOS, and Android. Let's see. This is apparently, if you buy the Yours Only box Super Limited Edition, you get your name added to the story. This looks like a visual novel, although you can definitely tell that some of these interfaces, as far as visual novels, seem to have a lot more options than you would expect. Let's see. Yep. And you have this fox-eared, cat-eared anime girl, and only 2 screenshots. And 44-second teaser trailer. Blurred out a little bit. So yeah, they're really not setting anything up here as far as what this is. Looks like she might be doing the ear cleaning thing. Otherwise, I have no idea what she's holding there. The bin there seems weird. And the float ball on the other side seems weird. But it does seem like this is probably a scene where a character is laying in her lap and having their ears cleaned by the other thing, which is more a Japanese thing, as far as having your ears cleaned by somebody who is romantically interested in you or cares for you deeply. And arguably, you shouldn't ever stick anything in your ears at all. But Japanese people, I think, have better technology and hopefully safer technology as far as ear cleaning. They also live in a different climate in general, so, and they have different genetics in general, so that might explain the ear cleaning thing being more of a thing in Japan. There is also just weirdness, certainly, as far as how people interact that often don't get talked about anyways, from culture to culture. Moving on, Strangers of Paradise Final Fantasy Origin is coming to Steam on April 6th, currently available via the Epic Games Store, so the exclusivity is going away. I don't know if you really have to play this game though, or which Final Fantasy games this really would even be an origin around. Moving on, a hockey action game, Goons Legends of Mayhem, has been announced for the PS4, PS5, Xbox One and Series, and Switch and PC. Interesting. You have several variations here of what you would expect to see in hockey. Kind of a top-down Zamboni driving mini game to a boss fight from a tilted perspective, and then some kind of level selector race happening on the ice. More traditional hockey. It's a lot of variety, which, yeah, that level of variety potentially could convince me to play a hockey game more than just a traditional hockey game would. Although, in all fairness, I probably would play a good hockey game once in a while if I had the extra time. Although it does then get into the field of sports game, and why would I play a sports game like hockey before I played something like basketball or football or soccer. The Famitsu sales have been listed here, although this is probably going to get updated because they only have the top 10, and in the top 10 you can see Fatal Frame for the Nintendo Switch is taking the 4th spot, IB for the Switch taking the 6th spot, and the PlayStation 4 version of Fatal Frame taking the 7th spot. PlayStation 5 of Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse, not listed. There is definitely a higher number here as far as non-Switch games in the top 10, in that you have a Fatal Frame PS4 game, Hogwarts Legacy PS5, and Wolong selling for the PS5. Also are now fairly consistently seeing the PlayStation 5 sell well and take the number 1 spot week to week in Japan, which, if anything, this is probably an argument that Nintendo needs to roll out and rush out their next device to try and undercut PlayStation 5 as much as possible, but they don't want to rush too much and roll out a bad Switch 2 type device. Redfall has a story trailer. If anybody really cares about Redfall anymore, or any more trailers towards Redfall, I'd rather just see the game come out and see how people actively do receive it. A game called Twin Sins Little Big Adventure Remastered and Little Big Adventure 2 Remastered has been announced for console and PC. It's due out in 2024. And then Little Big Adventure 3 has been delayed. It's funny, it has Twin Sins in the name above it. And honestly, I don't think this is the game I would be thinking of when I was thinking about Little Big Adventure. There's another game, almost certainly called Little Big Adventure on Steam, that sold a while ago. Let's see if we can. This developer name 2.21. Yeah, I've never seen this game before. There's definitely another game called Twin Sins, though. I mean, Little Big Adventure. Could we search for that? Let's see. We would do this, reload this. We would go back. Little Big. Yeah, there's a game called Little Big Workshop. That's not what I'm thinking of either. Little Big Guy, Little Big Monsters, Little Big Robots. I could have sworn there was another game called Little Big. But I'm not seeing it listed here. Maybe it's been taken off of Steam at some point. Searching for the words little and big quickly doesn't get you either in the actual title. BioShock 2, interesting, would have like little sisters in it, and that's almost certainly why it's coming up. Yeah, I swear there was some other like game called Little Big Adventure. Sorry, I'm taking a moment to scratch my sunburn. It's starting to peel. Moving on, the co-op space action game Void Crew has been announced for PC, which looks like it's a more realistic Among Us potential game, although maybe it has completely different gameplay style and nothing that is delayed them making more content, more TV shows. Although it is also a long running series over a very long amount of time, so like the actors are pretty old. They really should do like a full reboot with new actors. It's unfortunately probably just necessary at this point. But looking at this Void Crew of people in space, there is kind of a shame, and maybe with this legal rambling being settled, we might see a Red Dwarf license type game. That being said, it would almost have to be like a Telltale game for the comedy to work. Like, nobody really cares about the gameplay concept. That nobody would care that much about the gameplay in a Red Dwarf game. It would be much more of a Telltale game. That being said, maybe you could make a Red Dwarf like universe, in a Fallout style game where there's just a lot of small jokes and parodies happening there, which Red Dwarf inherently is a parody of other sci-fi TV shows, so parodying a parody or parodying sci-fi TV games or sci-fi TV movies, sci-fi TV shows. I keep saying TV in that for no reason. That would be interesting, certainly, if you saw something like Starfield come out and it was much more of a comedic parody than a serious take on a sci-fi game. Like Fallout, in a lot of ways, is a comedic parody more than a realistic take on a, what is it called, diesel punk type games, whatever kind of nuclear punk or whatever it is. Void Crew itself not interesting from what I saw so far. Maybe it will be more interesting later. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre launches August 18th, technical test set for May 25th. This is kind of a similar idea where a video game based on an old movie might be interesting. In this case, it is going to be a very bloody, graphic horror sequence, and maybe you're playing more as the bad guys than the good guys. It might very well be more interesting to play as the bad guys in that case. Puts the players in controls of the bad guys. Yeah, you are playing as the bad guys. Interesting. Or at least some people can play as the bad guys. It might very well be a game where some players are playing as the good guys, some are playing as the bad guys. Also might not be much of anything really though. If you look at the screenshot and the darkness and just simplistic textures, it's like there is potentially a danger in that you need to visually polish the game so much that it won't actually look anything like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie in any way. Let's see, a game called Hunt the Night launches April 13th for PC and later for Xboxes and PlayStations and the Switch. Looks to me like it's maybe a little interesting. I'm not sure I totally love this art style. It's like action adventure RPG. Yeah. Top-down twin stick shooter type game. This definitely seems like a genre that is heavily popular at the moment with like Vampire Smiles and not Vampire Smiles, Vampire Survivors. Yeah, that looks interesting. I need to hurry up though. A tactical deck builder called Toads of the Bayou has been announced for PC, which is coming out in 2024. This looks like one of those strategy placement type games, although it also seems to have some card effects and definitely a different type of visual theming in that you're playing as toads that are fighting each other, it seems like. It's an interesting thematic twist. Lost Eidolons for the PS5 and Xbox Series launches in 2023. We really have hit a point too where it's just we're getting announcements without getting specific dates, and we are not halfway through the year, but we're also not in January as far as announcements for games coming out this year. They should probably have specific dates a lot more, and we still very much are in a situation where very few games are actually getting released. We're just getting a lot of promises more than delivery. Coffee Talk Episode 2, Hibiscus and Butterfly, is coming to Xbox Game Pass on day 1. If you're super hyped around Coffee Talk 2, Episode 2. Disco Elysium, the Final Cut College Mode update, is now available for PC, and it's due out over the coming days for the PS4, PS5, Xbox Series, Xbox One, and Switch. It's okay. I assume college mode. No. It's not college, as in going to a university. It's collage, as in picking up and placing people to make a picture. It's a tool that puts characters, environments, and visual effects from Disco Elysium into the hands of all the player to create original art. What's funny too, though, is that this mode almost certainly has been released and timed to cover up the bad press of one of the owners, I think was the story I got from ZA/UM, leaving the company after suing and failing and having to pay the legal fees of the ZA/UM company. So, yeah, this definitely seems like a masterful effort here to release what you could probably have had available for release a lot earlier and just had in your back pocket, or you could have had this developed in a matter of just a couple of weeks or months. It's probably not too far off of the built-in tools that the developers would have had. But yeah, masterful stroke of covering up another bad press story. Let's see. Splash Damage, Sacriel, and Shroud announce a AAA open world survival game called Project Astrid. I assume each of these people are those gamer tags, and that these are all like streamers. Although Splash Damage may actually be a company, and so this may just be the guy representing Splash Damage, or one of these guys maybe representing Splash Damage. In a lot of ways, this is probably way too hyped of an announcement for a game that I don't think has a single screenshot or anything to show. Yeah. It's almost completely not news at this point. It's just not worth mentioning. And I don't know if I really want to go down the route of seeing more and more YouTube celebrities, Twitch streamers, personalities like that try to make their own games. At a certain level, they probably should try to make their own games, just for a more democratic system of developing games. But in a lot of ways, I just don't think we're going to end up as a gaming community with a large amount of successful, good games for how many people that try, because streamers and gamers, frankly, are not qualified people to make games, or really even most of the time, most streamers and content creators who play video games don't even have a very good opinion, or any opinion at all. They're just being personalities and entertaining people with their personalities. Like, being able to say, hey, what's up guys, it's PewDiePie, is not a skill that translates to developing video games. Very few gamers and content creators look at games with any kind of critical eye, or play enough games to have any kind of experience there compared to the average gamer's experience. If you've only been playing like Call of Duty, you'd probably be experienced enough to make a Call of Duty like game, but you definitely wouldn't have the experience to make a point and click type game. Game Grumps is probably a great example of that, where they play a lot of Family Feud over and over again. And when they are covering other games, they are usually goofing around and not looking at it with any kind of critical eye. Moving on, Remnant 2 has a Best Friends trailer. If you want to check that out. This is a third-person shooter series from Gunfire Games. It's coming soon. And the screenshots here definitely aren't synergizing at all with the Best Friends trailer concept here. Which, yeah, that's weird. I think we're probably at this point past the level at which adding a dog as a companion would get you a cheap pop of coverage or get people excited or hyped around your game. That being said, it is a little surprising more games even now don't have dogs as far as companions, characters, or at least dogs walking around. It's harder to animate dogs, and dogs have a bunch more fur that you would have to animate. That is one thing about the Resident Evil 4 versions too, is that the PlayStation 4 version versus the PlayStation 5 version of Resident Evil 4 renders Leon's hair completely differently, and it's very noticeable. Disney Speedstorm launches in early access on April 18th. Is this supposed to be Mulan, or is that supposed to be a different character? There's already in-game currency coming out for this game with the different versions. So, yeah. Inherently, Disney Speedstorm is probably dead in the water to begin with, because I don't know many parents that are going to want to spend money on a brand new Mario Kart clone. This, I guess, is Mulan, and this is Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Beauty. And everybody's in these like racer uniforms, so they don't have really their iconic clothing. They have maybe somewhat iconic color palettes, but I wouldn't even say it's that iconic. They're like Mickey Mouse here in yellow doesn't make a lot of sense, and Donald Duck with the black and yellow stripes doesn't make a lot of sense. The Beast being in all blue kind of doesn't make any sense either. So yeah, if anything, they didn't think the color palettes through, except for the two characters. If anything, you might go all blue for the character with blue fur, and then all brown with the color with brown fur. Even here, you can see Mickey Mouse's ears are being put out as points here. They didn't even, in this date reveal, bother to render it as a circle and smooth the points out with the polygons. If anything, I suspect this is going to be targeted at mobile gaming platforms, cell phones, Switch first and foremost. Far Cry 5 for the PS4 and Xbox One update to run at 60 frames per second on the PS4 and PS5 and Xbox Series. So the old versions of Far Cry 5, which I have to assume there is a new version of Far Cry 5, have been updated to run at 60 frames per second on the new systems. I don't think there actually is a new version of Far Cry 5, come to think of it. Yeah, no, this one didn't really get received that well, so yeah, they put out a 5th anniversary patch, simple patch, and that's about all they're willing to do, I imagine. McPixel 3 is now available for the PS4 and PS5 if you're interested in that, says Gematsu. The Surf Club gameplay trailer, coming of age adventure game for consoles and PC. So definitely a different type of art style when zoomed out it looks fine. When zoomed in it feels rough. I assume that this is a surfing centric kind of Animal Crossing type game. I might describe it as a Stardew Valley game, but it doesn't seem like it has any farming going on it. The strobing effect is definitely not necessary. So half of the trailer shows you kind of nothing. It really has the Playmobil feel to it. Like, you'd almost assume that this is brought to you by Playmobil toys, is I think what they're called. Cheap little plastic figurines, kind of like Lego minifigs if they weren't Lego, but weirdly Playmobil designs don't look very visually realistic either. Yeah. I don't know if anybody really has any nostalgia or care for Playmobil at all. I almost wouldn't be surprised if Surf Club is actually secretly a Frog Fractions like game that has some other secrets, or Doki Doki Literature Club around it. Thought I had this turned off at some point as far as recommended videos. I should work on that too and see if I can make sure that's turned off. But yeah, either I call this a weird French CGI style, and generally if I don't recognize an art style I question if it's French, or I say it has this weird Playmobil style, which is I guess more accurate of a way to describe it. Moving on, Compile Heart has a new game teaser trailer, Neptune, Office Scenery, and Curricula Vitae. I don't know what Curricula Vitae is. An official announcement is set for March 23rd issue of Weekly Famitsu. In the Neptunia series, it could be basically anything at all. It could be a remake of an old Neptunia game, or continuation of a reboot of the Neptunia series. Neptunia series, probably as popular as it has ever been, but it has shifted to a newer art style and a more censored art style in general, like trying to be a little bit more kid friendly because PlayStation requires that them to be more kid friendly, but also very possibly trying to just attract a larger audience for a niche game, a larger audience. If anything, each of these things being focused on makes me almost suspect that it's a card-based game of some sort, if not a total card game in the Neptunia universe or with Neptunia characters, which might make some sense to spin off into a different type of gameplay versus the standard action RPG games they usually are. A game called Persona 5 The Phantom X has been announced for iOS and Android. It's a full-fledged Persona 5 game for mobile platforms. Seemingly, though, not the same story of previous Persona 5 games. At a certain level, let's do it this way. It makes some sense to have Persona games on mobile platforms because the grindy nature of Shin Megami Tensei games and Persona games would benefit having mobile compatibility. Plus the graphics not that amazingly detailed, so a mobile cell phone could almost certainly render this or show this video fairly well. Anyways, we may run into a point though where somebody has like an iPhone 5 and they're trying to play games when iPhone 10 is out, or whatever number we're actually up to. There's something weird about this uniform or outfit in that it's kind of not a blazer jacket as much as it feels like it's just an actual raincoat jacket. And yeah, just feels like you're kind of overdressed with the big belt at the top, and then underdressed potentially with a skirt and leggings. Although, in fairness, most Japanese girls probably would dress like that. Like, most Japanese girls, I suspect, don't own any pants at all, even in the rainiest of rain seasons that they would be seen dead in. And the standard Japanese school outfits with hideous color palettes. But yeah, this definitely looks like a Persona game. With flat animated cutscenes. And then more 3D things. The actual gameplay here looks like it is going to be dungeon crawling, although it could be something different. Nah, I'm fairly certain it's dungeon crawling, persona summoning, and fighting. It'd be weird for you not to summon a persona in a Persona game and fight. I suppose if you like the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure series, you have a really good reason to also like the Persona series, since they effectively are summoning personas slash stands in the series, if that's the part you like about JoJo's, which is maybe not the part you like. I'm picking specific screenshots, but I really don't have time to look at any of them. Let's move on. Atelier Ryza series shipments have topped 1.6 million. 600,000 units have moved since March 2021. That is a big number, but these are shipments to stores, not actual sales numbers. And you also are splitting that between 3 different Atelier, well, no, 2 different Atelier Ryza games. The third game is not out until March 23rd, which, yeah, a couple days from now, come to think of it. Let's just put that on the fall list while we're here. So yeah, 800,000 on average between 2 games. It's not terrible sales, particularly when you're talking about a niche Japanese RPG series, but also not amazingly good numbers either. It's not the biggest numbers you'd ever want to see. Let's go ahead and turn this back on, otherwise that's going to be annoying. A beat 'em up action game called Robo Frenzy has been announced for PC, which, okay, does look like a beat 'em up game, maybe a little bit too colorful with a little too much going up on the screen. Let's put that on. Do I need to put this on the fall list? If I put every game that gets announced but doesn't have an actual date on the falling list, that's how my falling list gets way too much content on it. And it's games I can't really evaluate or react to because they're not even out yet. They won't have reviews. And anything described is questionable at best as far as the accuracy. Moving on, Tokyo Xanadu EX Plus is coming to the Switch on June 29th in Japan. Is this a JRPG? I guess it is. This is one of those cases where I wish the full screenshots would happen. Here we have flat 2D animation style being shown. So these are either cutscenes. Yeah, those probably are cutscenes. And then the actual game is 3D CGI in the art style, and you seem to walk around as JRPG. Yep. Dungeon crawling, action, hack and slashing type fighting RPG stuff, it looks like. Seems like you have a team of 2 or 3 characters. It's hard to pick out the differences in games like this versus the high amount of similarities, things like this. And honestly, it's probably not worth it to look at all this concept art and add the extra click for each character. So I mostly, up until this point, I have just been clicking through the center here, and it just always centers the image, so it looks like you're just looking at the thighs and the midsection of the characters, because that's what you're doing. Yep. But yeah, Tokyo Xanadu. It's currently available for the PS4 and PC worldwide, so inherently would make more sense to have just looked at the screenshots as they're depicted here. You can see that this game is extremely popular. I don't even know what the announcement there was, whether it was coming to the PS4 in Japan or the PS5 in Japan. It's not region locked or anything. It does have English, so you can play it on PC already. Moving on, Song of Memories is coming to the Switch on March 23rd. It's currently available for the PS4 and PC. So, here we have another visual novel type game, but we can see in this case is mixed. So I wonder if there's some level of censorship controversy here, or if the story is just not particularly that interesting. I have a collection of 2D anime characters, and then I guess this is male protagonist possibly. Seem to be doing flag dancing type stuff. Is this a musical game? Or is it a straight up romance dating game? Seems like it's a schedule dating game. Let's see. As far as actual mature content warnings, there are none. Let's see if we can figure out what the next one. Have you ever played a game that probably tried too hard to do too much? That's the impression I was left completing the game. Starts out as a rom-com visual novel, then goes in a darker post-apocalyptic direction, incorporating a rhythm minigame for combat sequences. The art is well done and utilizes the emote system to make the sprites move a little, though personally I preferred static sprites if it could have increased my frames per second. Yeah, the story is not good enough to justify the price. Too many cliches. Also had some problems with full screen, cut 3/4 of the screen, and achievements never unlocked in the English version. So seems to me like it's just a buggy, mediocre visual novel as far as Song of Memories. So now they're putting it on the eShop and Switch to try and sell it again. Which, yep, that's going to happen. We already talked about the Layers of Fear 11-minute gameplay walkthrough and screenshots. I seriously doubt anything here would catch my attention enough to make me want to play it. More. Almost all of these screenshots are just logos and press packet stuff. That's one thing Gamatsu does, and it's nice that they do. They take every single thing that you would potentially get in a press packet as a large video game journalist site might receive from a press release, and they put it out for anybody to see. Whereas most people would have taken one of these screenshots and used it, and only that one screenshot. And inherently, the screenshots up here very possibly are being picked from the press packet. One would assume this picture is in some way being cropped to fit this screenshot. But a lot of times you'll see these screenshots feel like they've been picked exclusively for your one website and not part of what would be a press packet handed to multiple websites. Moving on, an HD pixel art RPG, The Legend of Contraria, has been announced for PC. Which looks about average as far as a JRPG type looking game. Nothing particularly amazing about it. And then our last Gamatsu article for today is the Tekken 8 King gameplay trailer is available if you want to check that out. Alright, and then that's going to have me try and burn through the new games that came out on Steam in the past couple days very quickly. Water 2050 is probably nothing. VR Dinosaur Rescue Project. Why are you shooting them then? Nope. There. Nothing there as far as the dinosaur game. Next we have an adult game, Conquering Married Women Through Sex, which looks like a visual novel adult game focused around one character and way too long of a title. It's $16.99. It says it has Japanese full audio, some pregnancy element in it. It also interface-wise supports Chinese and English. It definitely seems like it's more narrative than visual focused. Feels like a true visual novel instead of just a very simplistic short visual novel adult game that you usually get. Gridlock roguelike deck builder game. I don't think it has enough visual polish for my standards, and if anything, I have been saying I need to raise my standards, so I'm not even going to bother to make YouTube shorts around things that I don't think that don't meet a certain level of quality in my mind. Forklift Extreme. That might be a funny joke type game. Super Cake Boy. I think we can say no to that. We really are at this point. Every stream is almost certainly going to have at least one adult game. That there's seemingly no real bundling happening anymore, or as much. Maybe still a little bit of bundling happening, but maybe not. I haven't seen anything where it feels like there's 4 or 5 adult games being released on one day. This is an English-Russian visual novel. And the last screenshot, well, you can kind of tell it's a Russian game because Japanese people would never have a character with a tattoo, and the anime inspired art style here just doesn't look that good. It's worth pointing out here that in Russia, Putin has specifically banned any LGBTQ plus type content, anything that they would call propaganda that's pro those things. They definitely will allow anti those things, and yet hentai and anime is very, very popular amongst the citizens, or a certain percentage of the citizens of Russia, and amongst that, girl on girl, which I suspect is what this is, as far as a Yuri visual novel, is somewhat popular. Of course, maybe it's more of a case that Russian companies are allowed and given a lot of leniency to make content that they are just trying to sell outside of the country of Russia. This is another adult game. Even though it wouldn't be allowed in their own country. Here we have a game called Isekai Frontline, which I have to assume is attempting to be a parody of like Girls Frontline. Flat 2D anime girls in a lot of like bondage S&M type images. You're the only guy in a zombie apocalypse world, fight in the zombie hordes and have a good time with the cute girls. The actual game is a top-down twin-stick shooter, though, and I can't help but assume that a lot of this art may straight up have been stolen from Girls Frontline. This feels like this is almost certainly copyright infringement, stealing characters from Girls Frontline and then making adult content versions of those characters that might be considered parody or original art. But yeah, the actual game is just this. And I suspect that's what has been stolen. Isekai means you were sent to a different world. Says it has full Japanese audio. This definitely looks shady though. There's no way around that. Even if it didn't look shady though, it also runs into the problem of just not looking like much of a game that you'd actually want to play. Excuse me as I drink some more water. I'm wearing out my throat. The Bubble Boy project doesn't look like anything. WE2K is rated very positively. I think we can just go ahead and put that on the wish list. This is one of those games that if somebody friended me on Steam and gifted me this game, you'd probably screw me over pretty well, because then I feel some responsibility to play this game that I wouldn't really want to play that much of. I don't have a huge amount of interest in WWE. When you look at these screenshots, it's John Cena. I don't recognize these two characters. I don't recognize this character. Steve Austin, definitely closer to the era in which I was watching wrestling, the Attitude Era stuff. So I would almost certainly play the game more focused on older wrestlers who aren't even wrestling. But like Hollywood Hogan, I missed out on because I wasn't watching WCW at the time. And Brock Lesnar here with a beard doesn't look familiar, and I don't even know who that is. And am I supposed to be able to recognize two female wrestlers looking at their backside? Notably here too, when you look at all these screenshots, while there's one character facing backwards, almost every other character is facing the screen, or at least in side profile. It does seem like there is just very deliberate male gaze being presented here, showing the butts of the characters and the backs of these characters. Unless there's something visually iconic about this, I just don't know, as far as like an intro dance or something like that. But even that, at that point, if they were doing an intro dance or there's an iconic shot that way, it's still probably because of the male gaze and looking at butts. Like, this is ironically the only screenshot of all the screenshots available that actually shows a wrestling move, which highlights just how little wrestling is about wrestling and how much of it is really just posing and talking or dancing around, literal dancing around, not just figurative fake wrestling dancing around. Moving on, Wand of Rosian, I'll give that a chance. AI stories, pretty much anything with AI should probably not be allowed. Anything with AI in the name potentially shouldn't be allowed. This new Roots doesn't look visually polished enough. First Squadron. Well, you've got a Star Fox clone here. Maybe with some furry elements to it. $6.29 English, Spain, Spanish. I mean, if you were going to make a Star Fox clone, this is probably a way to do it. This definitely feels more like the original Star Fox game than Star Fox 64, and it may actually play terribly, but I've got to give it a chance. Just for my desperate desire that a Star Fox game or a Star Fox-like game, as far as an on-rails space shooter from kind of a third-person perspective, I really want something like that to succeed. Trash Morphers doesn't look like anything. This doesn't look like anything. Here we have another adult game. My sister-in-law won't let go of my, well, penis, but the C word, seduced by a widowed prophetess. What's interesting is this video itself is blurred on top of my blur. This doesn't look like it's much of a flat 2D visual novel adult game. There's seemingly one character. It's not widescreen. The backgrounds seem fairly similar. It seems like they're all in a public spa onsen for the entire sequence. The game is not oddly available for purchase at all anymore. It's English and Japanese. Claims to have Japanese full audio, but there is no purchase button on the website. Like it's been taken down already. Is there something inherently why this game would be taken down? It's in the adult section. It seems to be labeled fairly accurately. It says it came out yesterday as far as the release date. Not seeing any school uniform or anything here. She's wearing a kimono when she's wearing anything. Character does not seem to be particularly young looking. So, yeah, there's nothing really here that would scream this game needs to be or would have been taken down by Valve. So I can't have I have to really question why it would be taken down. It does say it is a low-priced, practical erotic game with 15 CGs and 15 intimate scenes. So maybe it's just too short, 2 endings. I can see people potentially playing a game like that, spending 10 minutes on it, and then wanting a refund. Next game we have is Hentai Oni, which is just a slide puzzle with a collection of anime oni girls, anime demon girls, which this art may not be particularly original. It's hard to really say anything more about a game like that. It's 59 cents. It's a slide puzzle game. It has achievements, 24 achievements. They are just static images of anime girls in different states of undress. And that's pretty much it. Maybe one scene as in the screenshot of intercourse was shown. Next we have Nico Hentai Girl Beach Match 3. If anything, I guess this is potentially some bundling in that we have 3 adult games being back to back here. This is a match 3 game with 2D cat girls. We've leaned very heavily into the 2D anime art style today. With the match 3s, the 2D cat girls on the side seem to lose their clothing eventually. It's 59 cents. It says it has full audio support for 103 different languages, which probably just means they don't actually talk. Yeah, it's kind of clean and nice as far as the interface, but it does really just feel like it's a match 3 game. Match 3 game that potentially has 10 characters that you have to defeat, and then each character potentially has maybe 2, maybe 3 different states of outfits or states of undress. But yeah, we have yet to see any like furry games or any CGI 3D adult games, and we've seen 3 flat 2D anime games. But the Steam sale is happening right now too, so these games coming out at this time kind of makes sense. This Arena Story Rogue and Princess Knight, I don't believe has any adult content in it. It's a Japanese. Oh, actually it does. It has an 18 plus patch on it, which is probably the better way to sell a game, honestly, if you can sell it this way. If Steam allows you to do it that way. It's weird Steam is inconsistent, but it would make a lot of sense for games like this to be sold censored and then have an uncensored patch, or just have an uncensored mode built in that it warns you at the beginning of the first launch, do you want to play the censored version or not. Of course, this game doesn't look like much, and it doesn't support English, so I can't really do anything with it. Let's see, Poperite. Visually, I don't think there's enough elements here. It's just kind of bland backgrounds and a couple types of enemies. Here we have a already mixed reviewed mobile game port called Glory of War. It doesn't look that interesting. It's English and Chinese. It's a little surprising we don't have more of those, but also most of those I bet are Chinese only, and I'm filtering those out. I'm not looking at Chinese only language games, whereas I am willing to look at other language games other than English for every other type of language. There's too many Chinese only garbage games still on Steam last time I looked. It probably is at the point where I should reevaluate that and start looking at Chinese language games. But honestly, I don't have the time for it. Then we have something called Paper Doll. Forest Paper Doll. Paper Doll games existed in a small number very early in PC game development, as arguably for an audience of little girls to make paper dolls, which paper dolls used to be a toy that little girls would play with, but not in nearly probably 30 years or so. These custom art things at the end don't have anything to do with that. But also in the PC era, I can't help but assume that a lot of the paper doll software was just being played by perverted boys and men to see paper dolls in their underwear. Back in the day when games were on floppy disks and there just wasn't room for audio or video content. But this really is a style of game that just has no relevancy at all. If you were going to make a game where you had a character where you could swap out the outfits, you definitely wouldn't make or call it a paper doll game. It would be something like Love Nikki. Is that the name of the game? There is a fashion game on mobile, and they're making a 3D fashion based game for girls on consoles, and that was announced, and I haven't heard anything about it lately. But yeah, you would just have character generations or mods to change the outfits, and if you're going to focus solely on fashion, there is that Love Nikki game, I think is the name of it, available. Here we have yet another adult game in an anime art style called Black Academy, which looks like it might be half visual novel and half, well, they're saying roguelite shoot 'em up game, which if that is accurate, and it does seem like it might actually be accurate, that you're playing as this, fighting this, I guess. This would be the first ever shoot 'em up game that I've ever seen. I also have a fairly young, like, moe type character here in your thumbnail. The game is early access, which is also surprising whenever you see that in adult games. It's English, Korean, and Chinese. It's $13.59. It's in the adult section. It says it just has general mature content, though, which makes me wonder if there really is no adult content in the game. Let's see. Like, you have a lot of trailers here, a little animated just in the description around what the gameplay looks like. But I'm not really seeing anything more than just kind of lewd outfits. Let me go back up to the screenshots. So this is potentially a game that is in the adult section inappropriately. Right. There's one lewd screenshot that shows a character with their clothes torn and their shirt open and nipples are showing. So there's like one potential screenshot here, and that's it. Every other screenshot, it's not really even lewd, or maybe a little bit lewd, and that's it. Most of them aren't even a little bit lewd. Here's like an example. Like, you might call this a little bit lewd because you have a character holding up her breasts and accentuating that, but that's like the minimal amount of lewdness. It definitely makes a weird situation, certainly. I'm going to put the game on the follow list just to see how people like it. But yeah, you have an English, Korean, and Chinese language game for $13.59 in early access that's in the adult section, but is a side-scrolling shooter roguelite with seemingly very little adult content in it, to the point where it very possibly would get poorly reviewed for being in the adult section and not having enough adult content in it. This parametric edge engine doesn't look like anything. Chi Ninja doesn't look like anything of interest. This might be a very old game, or this might just be a game designed to look like an old NES game. Peppa Pig's World Adventure. we'll put that on the follow list. I half wanted to make a joke and just start censoring Peppa Pig, but no, there's no reason to do that. Plus, I don't have time for those kinds of jokes, and it's probably not good as a critic or news reporter, whichever I'm trying to be at the moment, to make jokes and add confusion. Film studio manager does not visually look like an interesting game, and I have to assume that's what it is. It's a game and not some kind of software. Moonbit. This is an interesting art style. I don't know if this really works. It's Mr. Hop's Playhouse 3. I'm gonna be generous on this, but probably this is a low effort horror game. Yeah, and I don't know if this low polygon art style is in any way better than some of the other low polygon things. It does certainly highlight, though, a way in which you don't have to fall into making a chibi character, even if you are making a low polygon character. You can make long stretched out arms and relatively smaller heads and try to get the limb proportions somewhat accurate or closer to accurate. Let's see, moving on. Running Riot. Souls of Tartarus. You know what I probably should do anytime there's a sale is talk about the sale and look at the front page on one stream, and then come back on the next stream on Monday in this case and have a list of potential games that I personally would have thought about purchasing, even though right now I know for a fact I'm almost certainly not going to purchase anything. Magical Defense Force. This is a different art style. Certainly feels very much like a Western art style. But it doesn't look terrible. It's fairly inconsistent from image to image. Like this seems kind of like a rough marker style art, where this feels like this is more Photoshop, where this feels a little bit rough marker art style, rough marker art style, where this again feels more Photoshop. Give this one a chance. I have only 2 more games to look at. Flee the Cat, as in run away from the cat. Is that how you spell flee when you're fleeing something, or is flee the name of the cat? Well, regardless, this game doesn't look like anything, so whatever. And then Toy Tactics. Looks like it might be something. So GameDeveloper.com, we already talked about Shuhei Yoshida getting a BAFTA Fellowship. Fellowship feels like a different word to use for award. Total War developer Creative Assembly has tapped Ubisoft veteran to lead its new UK studio. Who was the person? What was the name of the person? Let's see. CA North will be led by industry veteran Giselle Stewart, who previously served as Ubisoft's Director of UK Corporate Affairs, and prior to that worked at Ubisoft Studio Reflections as a General Manager. So they've hired a manager from Ubisoft to be the manager for CA Creative Assembly North. Atari has nabbed the rights to 12 retro titles, including Berserk and Frenzy, which feels like Atari would have owned the rights to those games originally if this was the original Atari company, instead of Atari being now a completely different company run by potentially a crazy person who's trying to make it a company but has yet to really succeed in making it a company. And it's very possibly unfair to call him a crazy person. I would say it's probably better to call him a crazy ambitious person who is too ambitious and probably doesn't have enough funding. Devs apparently told UK regulator that they feel compelled to support the Activision Blizzard merger, which quote unquote compelled here can mean either they personally felt compelled to do that, or you could take it as an implication that they're being forced by some external force like Microsoft to support the Activision Blizzard merger. I seriously doubt, though, Microsoft is putting much pressure on people to support the merger. If they did do that, then it would probably come out in the courts and look very bad upon them. Overall, they don't even have to put that kind of pressure on their companies, because every single other video game company wants the right to acquire and merge with other video game companies too. So they're going to support mergers. Big business is going to support big business, because all big business has to support itself in the hopes of making their own businesses bigger. Very rarely are you going to get pro-union type messaging from big business, because even if they could do it in their company, they're hoping that at some point they wouldn't have to do it. They wouldn't have to deal with the union. Let's see. Ex-employees at Epic-owned music platform Bandcamp are unionizing. Speaking of pro-union messages, comprised of all Bandcamp staff across the U.S., Bandcamp United is called on its leadership and parent company Epic Games to willingly recognize that it exists, which, interestingly, this will be an interesting twist, certainly, to see what Epic does there. Inherently, they probably will try and fight the unionization, as every company always does, but the fact that we haven't heard them fight up until this point is interesting. And yeah, if Epic does fight a union, then they definitely lose a lot of the momentum they've been trying to make as far as selling themselves as a company that is pro-creator and pro-developer. Although they're not even really pro-developer that much, because the Epic Games Store, at the moment, with it, even though it is rolling out self-publishing abilities, it isn't available now. So up until this point, for the years that the Epic Games Store has existed, the publisher has been the only people allowed to make slight changes, and has to go through an approval process. This is all what I heard from a game developer on YouTube, which just slows down the whole process as far as making a whole change, where on Steam, the developers can make slight changes to the storefront, they can update software, they can do a lot of things without Steam having to really check things a second time, or without going through a platformer. We have seen in a couple of scenarios in the past years of a publisher having the rights and to a game, and then publishing games that the developer doesn't want published on Steam, and there's been kind of internal fights. Most of those fights have boiled down to somebody had to sue somebody or do a DMCA strike against somebody, and it seems like Steam stayed mostly out of it and just followed the letter of the law as much as they could there. Maybe there was one instance where Steam actively took a game down from the publisher was listing, as there was some question as to who actually had the rights or not. But yeah, on the other hand, the Epic Games Store probably has sided with the publisher multiple times in those types of scenarios if they popped up. Moving on, the Splitgate dev 1047 Games has added an ex-Ubisoft EA staff in key roles. With its new hires, 1047 Games is aiming at making sure the next project address some of the primary criticisms around the debut of Splitgate. Splitgate was like a team-based shooting game with portals, I think, and sounded like an interesting concept, but obviously it had some major problems because nobody started playing it or stuck with it for very long. The Twitch CEO and co-founder Emmett Shear has announced his departure. Shear had been Twitch's CEO since 2011 and now is leaving the company he helped found to spend time with his family, as they quote you. I've seen accusations from other YouTubers, though, that it's shady as to why his announcement was just effective immediately, which I think it was, and also the new person coming in potentially being just as bad, if not worse, than the guy in charge of Twitch, which it's hard to believe that there could be anybody worse than the guy in charge of Twitch right now. Of course, instead of listening to other YouTubers' speculation, which can often be wrong or just lies completely, we'll we'll get it from the horse's mouth somewhat. There, I'm still getting it from GameDeveloper.com's reinterpretation of what was said. He'll continue to work at Twitch as an advisory role. He plans to be an active part of his newborn son's life. So, yeah. But that's an argument for parental leave. That's not really an argument for stepping down completely. It is ridiculous that that there's perhaps this thought that CEOs do that much work that they have to step down just for their newborn son's parental leave type time. And if CEOs are working that much, that's also a problem. There's a very long tweet, certainly, if you would want to read this. New blood at Twitch, though, really couldn't be a bad thing if it was actual new blood. But even old blood in power, new power in a new position of power, would probably be better for Twitch, because Twitch has just been this nightmare as far as just the way they run their company and having any kind of focus or idea. When's the last time we've heard Twitch announce any major new features or anybody moving to Twitch or anything that would potentially bring new eyes to Twitch? It's just not there. There's only controversies that ever come up around Twitch, and last time I went to Twitch to watch anybody stream was probably 4 or 5 years ago. It's really failed. Meanwhile, Amazon acquiring Twitch would really like to see them be a lot more successful. So at a certain point, I could see just clearing the slate clean, having a whole new Twitch launch up, and just saying, we're starting over from scratch, we're focusing solely on video games, or we're just being YouTube and we're focusing on all kinds of videos. Pick a lane and stick to it. And we're just going to start from scratch and potentially either go pro bathtub streaming, Twitch slot streaming, and be like a Pornhub section on our storefront, or we're going to just say nothing like bathtub streaming and all that nonsense. Like, the massive amount of manipulation on Twitch as far as algorithms and doing gimmicks to get views was way higher than on YouTube. At least on YouTube you have some percentage of people trying to actually make content and succeeding, whereas on Twitch everybody has to either have controversy or bathtub streaming type stuff happen. even if nothing on the face of Twitch changes, getting rid of or moving out some of the bad employees in the background of Twitch also would probably help a lot. Moving on. Fortnite to expand its creation tools with the Unreal Engine 5 editor. From Save the World to Create the World. There's a subheadline there. Yep. Fortnite definitely will be used as an example to show off new features in the Unreal Engine editor. Alright, we've got some fall list games to clean up. Let's see. Some kind of puzzle game with no relevancy. I think we'll say no to that. And we have a student project from DigiPen that's free, so we'll put that on the wish list. No reason to leave it on the fall list. We're going through the C's at this point. Cypher's Game VR. Is there a non-Cypher's VR game? Yeah. Alright. Put that on the wish list. It's rated very positively. Get rid of the VR version. Let's see. Psycho came out in July. It looks like it's mixed, so we'll get rid of that. If anything, I guess we are probably, I'll give this one more time since it came out in August. Although I need to make sure what year in August. That doesn't look that interesting. Yeah, if I'm about 3 or 4 months into the year and I'm at the C's, then it does potentially take 2 years to go through the fall list without doing any extra fall list cleanups. And this doesn't look interesting enough. Plus, it's early access since 2020. Of course, there might be a lot of R's or S's as far as games go. Yeah, I kind of need to remind myself we're in 2023, so pretty much anything from 2022. Let's see, is there adult content in this? Doesn't say there is. Vampire life simulation game. Yeah, it's a vampire daughter raising simulator game, which is an interesting twist. It's not super relevant, but it's over the 30 reviews, so I can put that on the wish list. Alright, and yeah. Custodian, beginning of the end, September 1st, 2021. Well, mostly positive. Metroidvania game. It's right there on the edge. It's a brutal and difficult platformer. You know what? That scares me away, so I'm going to say no to that. Okay. So here you have the Steam Deck page as far as the Steam sale, which, yeah, includes the carrying case even if you buy the cheapest one, 10% off at $360.10. You get a community profile bundle, which is not worth anything, but you get faster storage. Now, arguably, though, you can swap these out. So you buy this now, wait a year, you potentially could get a 512 NVMe that is the right size and shape for this Steam Deck, and it would be cheaper than this upgrade, because they're effectively telling you that for $110 more you're getting 4 times the storage, when $110 for an NVMe that would be 512 is probably a little too expensive there, depending on, unless you're getting a really good setup. Of course, if you're just going to buy your own memory stick, you get out of the profile and you might get storage that's way slower or way faster, so you got to be very careful there, and you don't want to definitely get fake storage. Only the highest level gives you the anti-glare etched glass, so the middle offer is actually terrible. Like, definitely makes a lot of sense to buy this or buy this. Exclusive virtual keyboard themes. Like, the fact that 2 of the things they're offering here are digital media, and then the carrying case comes with each one, which arguably I would give up paying for getting the carrier case if it saved me $30. I'd switch out a carrying case for a dock for sure. The anti-glared etched glass too, probably not $110 difference, because it is just the etched glass there. The screens are exactly the same from what I can tell. And then they're advertising here during the Steam sale a lot of this. Oh yeah, I was mentioning that in the lower left hand corner, usually on the browser there would be a black box when highlighting a link, and it would tell you what the URL is. In Firefox, with a lot of accepting of risky behavior, you can make a custom chrome.css file that it will look at. Apparently Firefox is also based on Chromium or Chrome. They all seem to be. But yeah, with the right custom CSS you can block that, which inherently means with the right custom CSS I could probably block a lot of things if I wanted to. It is 100 times better though to use uBlock Origin in almost every other scenario. So you have a plugin and a controller, a plugin and a button to click on, and adjustable settings with uBlock Origin. It's only in the actual need to change the interface. So yeah, interesting that the dock is not mentioned at all, so it probably isn't on sale. You have a long list here of games, many of which I already own, that either have some level of compatibility or full compatibility. I would be interested in seeing where the reviews are with Atomic Heart. Very positive is what it said. Okay. See, it pops up this whole different thing when I hover over it, and maybe that's because of some of the plugins I have installed. Gotham Knights is mixed. But yeah. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 doesn't have any compatibility at all as far as the Steam Deck, and yet they're still promoting it. Like, almost nobody that owns, this is probably a good time to get the Lego Star Wars Skywalker Saga. Almost nobody that would buy or own this. Is this in early access? I think it isn't anymore. Yeah, almost nobody who buys a Steam Deck, though, is going to not own a PC too. And yet that is the exact scenario that I would suggest for parents, is to, instead of buying their kids a computer first, or a laptop, my suggestion would be to get them a Steam Deck first, and maybe never buy them a laptop or computer. You can get away with it and still get them into PC gaming. Yeah, Atomic Heart here definitely seems to be way better received now. And I think they've made some promises to fix some things, certainly in Atomic Heart, although maybe not enough things. These weird robotic twin characters, there's a mod that will like remove their masks and show a human face. I think there's also a mod that makes them have bloated pregnant bellies. Maybe that's not a mod, maybe that was just fan art I saw though. For the front page, and we'll end on this, there is the spring sale happening between March 16th and March 23rd, 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can see you have a number 23 up here and a Steam. Yes, that's 2023, and a Steam black with a little bit of blue Valve logo. And then they're zoomed out a little bit more than normal here as far as just the big games they're promoting. Nothing amazing or brand new amongst this collection, and it's not really the biggest discounts either. 60% off of one game, 50% off of Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. The one-shot, Tiny Tina's Adventure one-shot, was free yesterday, so you might want to check that out. Just absolute zero cost. Now, Tiny Tina's Adventure one-shot, a one-shot adventure, whatever it's called, is literally just the Tiny Tina's DLC for Borderlands 2, separated out as its own separate game, and then they tried to resell it to people, and people were very upset that it was kind of deceptively advertised in the sense that people are buying it and either thinking it was Tiny Tina's Wonderlands or thinking it's new content, when it literally was just the Borderlands 2 DLC that everybody had already purchased and played, or most people had already purchased and played. It being free at this point shows how valueless it really was as a product, and should have probably just been free to begin with. And honestly, they should have just not spent the time or energy on it, and instead given away the base Borderlands game, Borderlands 2 game, for free, and the DLC for free, or just given the DLC for free, and then still sold Borderlands 2. 100 most played games on deck. Is that the list we looked at? I guess that is what this list was. Okay. Which means let's try and go back to the front page. So you get below the fold as far as the promotion of the Steam Deck. If anything, this is mostly focusing around the Steam Deck. I wonder if there's some DLC that would bump this price up higher. But on the front page, you're seeing 60% off, nothing big like 75 or 80% off. Quickly, here they are. Browse a category plus visit a category below and claim a free sticker daily, which this is a different attempt, I guess, as far as, let's open that in a new tab and see what happens. Doing a curated feed without actually doing the curated feed, which noticeably I'm not seeing the curated feed here. Featured franchises. It's kind of hard to buy anything. You got some Warhammer franchises up to 90% off. You've got Resident Evil up to 87% off. It's never going to be something new that's particularly discounted, although some of these games are decently priced when on sale. Witcher franchise, 85% off. Hitman, 80% off. Fallout, 75% off. Battlefield. Feels like it's been a while since a Battlefield game came out. Players like you love, based on the games you've played. Here's some direct recommendations, and many of them are just on my wish list already. I got Control when I bought it for free when I bought a graphics card, so I don't have it on the Steam accounts, nor do I think I would spend any money to double up on buying that game. Though I could see some reasons. Psychonauts 2 would be a great game to get. A lot of these, not super knocking my socks off. I definitely would like Hades 1. There's a good argument to getting that. Digital art book for Killer 7 for 74 cents. Not a terrible price, but I probably wouldn't care much about it. I really didn't care about Killer 7 after playing it. It's a kind of a shame, for as much as I've heard people talk about it and love it. Nier Automata, I haven't gotten around to that. Any Persona games, I haven't gotten around to that. And we straight up just have top sellers, and I can't help but assume that maybe something here has accidentally been blocked as far as the top sellers images loading in. And then you get way down here to the exploration queue, and it doesn't seem like there's any recommendation around that. Somewhere around here they were talking about like load animations that you can buy from the point shop, but I'll talk about that I guess on Monday, as far as spending the valueless points on Steam on the point shop that you get when you make a purchase on loading animations. Honestly, it's probably the best thing you could do with the valueless points though. So get the loading animations in the assumption that you'll eventually maybe want to play with those. They are just boot up animations. I assume boot up animations that happen when you turn on the Steam Deck. You can also use them in big picture mode. They might be more loading animations of specific games to hide the fact that it sometimes can be slow to load up a game on a Steam Deck. It's not incredibly slow by any means, but it can be slow. There definitely will be compromises compared to having a giant PC like what I'm streaming on right now. Like, you're not going to have something that is huge as far as a desktop PC and shrink that down to a Steam Deck and not lose some kind of level of cooling or some kind of level of processing power or GPU power. Little misfortune here, $6.99. That's probably the best deal you'll get for a while on that game. Noticeably here they have this pattern of like pipes and electrical things in the background. Here you have a adult game being recommended because I played Hades on the main front page. I had to scroll really far down to get to an adult game though. But yeah, this does seem like this has finally been designed in such a way that scrolling down, this is potentially a cell phone game port. Like they may have finally gotten to the point where you don't end up at that black background at the bottom and you do just infinitely scroll forever. Which it never really did make sense that there was a line in the sand they would draw. 25% off Return to Monkey Island. I didn't know I didn't own that. But yeah, it was kind of crazy that they drew this line in the sand where they said, alright, you've scrolled down enough, stop scrolling. honestly, they should just let you infinitely scroll forever. Sonic Mania, $9.99. Like Link Legacy of Duelist Link Evolution, $9.99. Lego Builder's Journey, $6.79. Corval Space Program 2, not discounted at all. We are getting to a point where we're seeing games that are not discounted. Or you're seeing games like Scorn here that aren't discounted enough. Is this game out yet? Vampire the Masquerade Swan Song? Yeah, I don't think that game is out yet. It doesn't have a price. Notably here, we're not running into a lot of adult anime games on the front page. This Robo Life 2 Nova Duty might be an exception there. But yeah, not a lot of Japanese-centric games overall, even though we do have a couple of Persona and Metal Gear Rising there. The problem, of course, is that it just all is the same stuff. We really just have not had any new games released in the past couple of years with the pandemic and with just like delays. And so there's just not that much that's brand new and exciting that would bring you to shop on the Steam storefront. And when you're getting down to recommending Zup 7, a game that is just a long running series of low effort games that are flooding the Steam front, you've really run out of options. And I would say that is one problem in particular with Steam, is it just does not go dig deep enough. Like, once you start scrolling really far down, it just does not dig deep enough. Like double dipping on the Walking Dead definitive Telltale series is a tough sale. I'm opening some of these games because they are catching my attention, but really isn't a lot of them. I really would prefer to see just like one row of here is some random game that is being thrown at you for no good reason. We just want to see if you might be interested in it. Now, arguably, YouTube does too much of that, and Facebook is way too much of that as far as their algorithms throwing random things at you. Here we have a 3D CG adult game. That being said, we haven't seen any new 3D CG adult game today. But yeah, I think Steam is too literal in its connections when there's room for an occasional random element. Just like 1%, 1 out of every 100 games thrown out here. Epic Card Battles, trading card game. And yeah, if I didn't have the thing toggled on my storefront to show adult games, one would assume most of these adult games would not be showing up. Although there is always the possibility that something will not be labeled appropriately. Super Seducer. Like, I thought about putting this on the wish list, but I think there was a controversy around this guy being kind of a pervert slash player, which, I mean, he's basically selling himself that way, and I think I just opted not to put that on the wish list. House Party. Game Grumps are in that. And yeah, I don't think there's really a game there. And yeah, I've just been scrolling for an incredibly long amount of time. They are like great soundtrack games. Like they're trying to find different ways in which they can recommend something to you and say how it's relevant, but they are kind of stretching it or struggling. Yeah, 50% off for Dragon's Lair wouldn't be terrible. Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, 50% off is not terrible. House Flipper 2 I don't think is out yet. Hotel Life, Resort Simulator, Farming Simulators. But yeah, at this point it seems like now they are just recommending random games to me. Among Us. I'm just opening a ton of tabs to look at later today, which I think that's probably what I will do today for the most part. Here you have Idle Hands 2 as an adult game, and Monster Prom 3, Monster Road Trip. But yeah, I'll probably spend the rest of today just shopping, and then I'll have potentially a theoretical shopping list of things that might be worth looking at. Although really I shouldn't be shopping this way, I should be shopping by looking at the fall list. And not the fall list, the wish list. Because those are the games that have already been approved to be purchased. Here we have another CG 3D game. And see, we're kind of back now. Psychonauts 2 being advertised a second time. Immersive sim games. There we go. So, we're out of personalized recommendations for you now. We can recommend some different titles once you've played more games. Still looking for more? Check out a random game. Let's see what a random game will do. Just takes us to a random game. We had to stretch there. A random game that's already on my wish list, by the way. Yeah. As an incredibly long direction, certainly, to scroll down. And unless I blocked it with uBlock Origin, there's no line in the sand where they say, here's some other games to recommend. Noticeably, they didn't have a banner here either for games under $5, games under $10. They're not even trying to show those kinds of searches. Games that have been released in the last 24 hours, the last 48 hours. If anything, they've dropped a lot of different ways in which they tried to present the same games over and over again in favor of really just having the shopper on Steam experience Steam the way it was expected to be dealt with. Now here's the problem is I don't know how to easily get up to the top here. It's like it's programmed here to put me at the bottom. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. Another very long thing. Again, I'll say apologies to anybody who commented in the chat. Sorry, the chat was broken today. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. I always ask you to like, share, and subscribe these videos because it helps me with YouTube. Click the notification bell because then you can actually get notifications when my videos come out and watch them as quickly as possible, because that also helps me with YouTube. And then if you want to support me even further than that, this is a great time to friend me on Steam and gift me a gift card or a game off my wish list while things are on sale. Or you can support me through Patreon. Maybe I'll set up a coffee page in the future. Thank you for watching.